Hello?
Hello.
Oh, goodness. That is
How are you
ye.
doing?
How are you doing?
I'm all right, thank you. I'm not
Let
doing
me just
too
turn you up
bad.
so I think that's a good level. Can you just say a sentence or an introduction so I can play with audio levels while you talk?
Sure, the quick brown fox jumped over the lazy dog for some
Awesome.
reason.
Awesome.
And I think it's supposed to be jumps anyway, otherwise you don't have an S in that sentence,
Exactly.
surely.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Good to how
The,
how is your Sunday morning?
uh, I'm currently rehydrating. I can't say I went to bed at a reasonable hour, but it wasn't too late, so.
I'm glad I scheduled in a VOD beforehand so you could kind of spend the morning to do as you do.
Oh,
But
mate, you were talking about beginning at 7 a.m. or 6 a.m. or something. I
yes,
was
well,
like,
that's when I start. I
that
like,
isn't happening.
I try my hardest to kind of broadcast during European hours, simply because the normal Overwatch League broadcasts are during North American hours when all the viewers are asleep. So that's why
True, true.
despite being 6 a.m. for me, it's it's for the Europeans, so they actually get to kind of watch something live if they are Overwatch League fans.
My
But
way of throwing a bone to the Europeans is to stay up till 3 a.m. streaming, and then they can watch it whilst eating their breakfast.
oh, that's smart. That's smart. That's a real
There
smart
you
way
go.
of
I
doing
mean,
it.
it's not smart. It's just that we finish work at 11 p.m., so I just stream afterwards. There was no thought put into it.
So, for like the four people in chat who might not know who you are, do you want to give like a quick introduction about who you are, why they should care about you, what you do?
You don't have to care about me if you want, but I am Sideshow. I work on the Overwatch League as an analyst, a desk analyst. I used to do some color casting for Overwatch tournaments. Used to be a TF2 guy. Used to play at a top level in TF2 and then transitioned over. Although for some people seem to think whenever I like reading these Reddit threads occasionally that are like, what are the casters SR? Because it tickles me that people think Matt is in top 500 every single time this topic comes up.
And that
Uh,
Mr. X gets boosted by his girlfriend, or
yeah, I think I started that rumor actually, and then people took it seriously.
yeah,
Yeah,
people taking that like really serious. There was a second thread where it came up like 5 or 6 times. That's
yeah,
basically
I love that.
fact now. It's basically
It
fact
is,
that
yeah.
Mr. X is boosted by his girlfriend.
Yeah, but Mr. X actually paid his girlfriend to boost her, and
That's
now
a
she's
true
banned
story.
from the
That's a true
Overwatch League.
story. Yeah, that's why Mr. X is a caster and not in the
Yeah,
Overwatch
all the
League.
Koreans
Yeah,
won't even say his
no,
girlfriend's name.
no,
You won't see a single Korean caster saying Mr.
no.
X's
I
girlfriend's
don't think
name
it's ever
for that
happened,
reason.
and it never will happen, not once. So, what did you actually? Before we get into that, there's a lot of people, and we were talking about it earlier, where there are quite a few people in the chat. This stream is focused around analysis and education and whatnot, and there's not like any sort of clear path to become a coach, an analyst, a caster, any of that. So, kind of, how did you end up working for the Overwatch League, and do you have any advice for anybody else who is interested in becoming a caster, at the highest of levels in esports or just Overwatch?
Mm. Overwatch was weird because it was a brand new game and it wasn't tied to any previous title. So if a new CS game came out or a new game that was like League of Legends, then you would expect all of the talent from whatever previous game it was superseding to carry over. But Overwatch was new, and so it was in some sense an arms race to just learn the game. And then I just participated in the arms race really early on. During the beta, I became aware of the game because a lot of people in TF2 were talking about it, and I came from that game and did some casting over there. Um, and the players were obviously trying to transition over and make careers over there. I had long since given up on being a player, having been the worst player on my team every single time I participated.
You just couldn't
Uh,
keep up with mechanical skill, or didn't want to?
oh, my mechanical skill was absolute trash tier.
Yeah,
Absolute trash tier.
buddies.
You
Woo!
should, you should. There are YouTube videos galore of me just being styled on in the most ridiculous of ways by plebeians
I
in
need
TF2.
links to some of these.
Oh, but Shadowburn in particular actually was a particular nemesis. He used to destroy me. But so yeah, I just kind of put a lot of hours into watching every game that I could possibly find from all the different regions, and I thought at some point, if you are the literal expert on as many regions as you can be an expert on, then somebody's gotta want to hire you in the end. So
Absolutely.
that was my approach to it, was to be as preparation focused as possible. and kind of rely on other people requiring that at some point, and it kind of worked out.
And
But
especially with, I think
yeah,
the rumors are 4 new teams for season 2 of the Overwatch League and expanding up to 28 teams. You're
that's what Nate said is his aim, 28 teams. Yeah,
28 teams. So there is, even the current teams, there's not really enough, not all of the, at least not all the contenders teams
yeah,
have coaches and analysts. Like Florida Mayhem was recently hiring an analyst. XL2 put out an ad for a coach because they only have an analyst right now. So even with the current teams, like the Overwatch League teams are all staffed, but like the contenders teams aren't fully staffed yet. And there's going to be more expansion teams coming out. I might be crazy, but isn't it a great time to get involved as a coach, analyst, or
yeah, yeah.
caster?
Oh yeah, it definitely is. I mean, even if you're talking about casting, they're still looking for other talent. The league's going to expand. The scene is still tiny. It's not in its
Hmm.
final form in any sense. So yeah, there are still going to be tons of opportunities. It's about putting yourself in the best position and making sure that you're really able to take advantage of opportunities whenever they present themselves, I think.
Now, this is a question that actually gets brought up in chat a surprisingly large amount of times. But what do you think is more likely, Overwatch dying or Overwatch 2.0?
Um, I mean, I think Overwatch 2.0. I don't know whether either are particularly likely in the short term, or not even the short term, but within the next. Monty talks a lot about esports having 10-year lifespans, or at least 5-year lifespans, this kind of thing,
Mm-hmm.
which was one of the reasons why he made the switch over from League, which is currently at its like 10-year anniversary, over to Overwatch. And so, given Blizzard's support and the entire company's support for the Overwatch League and Overwatch in general, it seems much more likely to me that they would continue the brand rather than allow it to die.
Absolutely. I think I'm always surprised by how many people come into chat when I'm streaming and ask me if Overwatch is dying, but it's certainly I don't see the signs of it. I only see the signs of growth. There's certainly some impediments to the growth, like the anger over ranked, but that's existed since season 1, and the game still managed to survive. So there's a few stumbling blocks or roadblocks. Overall, the game is going well, and a worse kind of sign for a dying game isn't that shit is wrong and people are complaining, but it's that shit is wrong and no one's complaining because no one cares. So I
Yeah.
think I think the fact that there is so much anger over the system not being perfect is healthy and will. I mean,
I've definitely gone through the 7 stages of grief, and the entire community did with TF2, and I saw that kind of arc. It's like bargaining. You try and get in contact with the developers, then you just have some stage of anger, and then it's like you're trying to lash out at them, and then eventually it all just settles down into quiet acceptance that the game is going nowhere and it will die. And that was a beautiful arc that played out over something like 8 years with TF2. I don't even see that even approaching for
yeah, we're
Overwatch.
nowhere even near the start of the death throes. But enough of that. When I contacted you initially to see if you were interested in coming on the stream, which I greatly appreciate, and I think the viewers will really truly enjoy it, you had mentioned that you wanted to do a deeper dive into Seoul Dynasty. Can you kind of even I don't know what you quite meant by that, so kind of let chat know what you meant by the deeper dive into Seoul Dynasty. What are the questions on your mind, and what answers are we looking for today?
So I think the overall aim would be to try and figure out why Seoul Dynasty, um, when they came into the league, looked like they had all the pieces and have failed to perform with them. Because the answer early on in the league, the easiest answer was Jaehong and Toby were their previous star players, albeit at an unusual role to have your star players compared to most teams. And the meta did not suit them. It was a slow-paced Mercy meta. This was not the kind of patch that had led to Seoul being dominant in the past. But as we went into stage 2 and now into stage 3, they're still kind of at the top of the table. I think they're in third place overall. I'm not 100% sure about that. And they haven't lost that many games. But the ones that they kind of scrape by, and then some of the games they lose, they look incredibly shaky. And their roster situation, where they just randomly seem to sub in, they subbed in Guido and Gambler against
Yes.
Houston, and they've subbed out Fleta for a number of maps. including Blizzard World against their most recent opponent. I can't even remember what that game was. These are all issue. All of this kind of points me towards a deeper problem, which I think is centered around Miro. I think Miro is probably their number one issue at the moment, because the tank play is so important in Overwatch right now.
And the current meta tank play is so important. We were saying that great tank play keeps you in the running, but bad tank play just sinks you immediately. One mistake and you're dead. Yeah. Your entire team's dead. And Chad is saying that Seoul is in 6th place right now.
6th this stage, I think. They're 3rd overall.
Oh, yes, you're correct with that.
Yeah, and your Chad's right as well. Fleder was sick for this game, but he wasn't sick for the Houston game where they actually subbed him out for pretty much the entire series. They ran Wicked and Munchkin, I think, which was pretty strange. But yeah, I think Miro has been a weird one because early on in the stage when they were playing around Mercy, he played a little like Fraggy, where he would rely on the Resurrect a lot and dive fairly deep, and then would go in. Toby would pop Valkyrie, they would res him up, and they tried to buy space by making those kind of plays.
Yep.
And then in stage 2 and stage 3, he has not played like any other top Winston in the league, where they are frequently found hiding and they're waiting for their tracer to call the engage, and then they're diving with their tracer and trying to secure individual picks. He uses his cooldowns to stay alive rather than to engage deeply with his team, and I think that's really messing them up. I think they don't understand that their strengths are now in their DPS compartment, because that has never been something that Lunatic High had, and they don't understand how to maximize that. Because in theory, if you got Fleder and Munchkin there, they should be able to make a real stellar world-class team out of that. But instead,
yes, but it's not working out the way you would hope.
Exactly. So those are the questions that I have in my head. What is quite going wrong for Seoul Dynasty, and is Miro the problem, as I have a gut feeling that he is from watching the games live, but I haven't gone back over the VODs in enough detail to be able to tell yet.
Now, I've got about 3 hours. How long do you have?
Yeah, that time as well.
Okay, we'll aim for about 3 hours or so. Now, which map specifically did you want to look at? We probably don't have time to go through like a full series. So did you want to do like a couple maps from New York, or sorry, the Dallas Fuel versus Seoul? Did you want to do a couple maps of LAG versus Seoul? Did you have VODs from different games you wanted to take a look at? Which one did you want to start with?
You said you've already taken a look at the Houston Outlaws game, right? Oh, was that not the case? Was that
no, I haven't looked at any Seoul maps.
Okay.
I looked at the New York versus Boston one this morning. So yeah, we're open to look at any game you would like.
So the game against the Houston Outlaws, they didn't run Fleder, and so I'm not as interested in, because I think that's a mistake of the management.
Okay.
Although it hints at deeper issues. So if we look at the Dallas Fuel game, I think that would be fairly interesting.
Which map would you like to look at?
Gambler and Zephyr there.
We had Volskaya, Numbani, Nepal, Route 66, and Oasis for the tiebreaker.
Let me think. Which match was this? I'll have to reconstruct it in my head. I can't even remember this series. Was this the one where Dallas were insane on Route 66, or was that a different?
Yes, this was the one where they were insane. On Route 66. Do you want to watch the Route 66 game?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, cool. Let's watch Route 66.
Let's watch Route 66. Now I'm just going to set up screen share so that you can kind of see my screen. Let's just do that quite quickly. 30, click share. You should be able to see my screen okay?
Yep.
Okay. I'm just going to...
You're looking at my beautiful Discord picture.
Yes, it is quite the picture. Awesome. So we're going to take a look at Route 66, Dallas Fuel versus Seoul Dynasty. If mods could update the title, I'd appreciate it, including, again, who our guest is, Mr. Sideshow. But before we get started, you are Overwatch League analyst, so you're already hired by the league, but do you have any socials that people could follow you on? Twitter, Twitch? I know you've been streaming more recently, so if people want to hear more from you, because you're a very well-spoken and knowledgeable individual about the game, where can they find you?
My Twitch is twitch.tv/sideshow, and my Twitter is @sideshowgaming. And that's about it. You can find me under most of those.
Awesome. Okay. You can see the screen?
I can.
Let's get into it then. Let's get into it.
This is Zoe.
Nah.
Guys, those shirts, man. Well, is there any story behind their shirts recently this week? Because they have been getting crazy.
With the mid-season transfer window, we also had a mid-season wardrobe transfer window. So we swapped out a couple of shirts and swapped some new bad boys in, just livening it up, you know.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so on
the key is if they're talking about our shirts instead of how bad our analysis is, then you get away with anything. That's the key.
That's actually really smart, man. His shirt was so good. Didn't he make up? No, his shirt was great. He didn't miss those calls. He didn't miss that ult. No, not at all. Okay, so what do you just kind of we've already shown you here, but what do you expect to see Dallas Fuel to run? What do you expect Seoul Dynasty to run? Are we going to see more of the Tracer Widow? What do you think are you going to expect from the Seoul Dynasty, since they are the focus of this analysis here?
Well, the first thing to note is that they're running Wicked and running Zephyr, and I believe in this game they were running Zephyr because Zumba had a minor wrist injury, but they have run Zephyr in the past, and they were running him even before Zumba got injured. I think that was because they thought that Zephyr was the better pick in this instance. People think that Seoul are hiding strategies. It seems incredibly unlikely to me that that's the case.
For this long, certainly, yes.
Yeah. Wicked as well coming in normally means that they're going to play a lot of Junkrat and Peel-focused play rather than playing aggressively. That's been the case right back from stage 1. So I'd expect them to be playing something as they are now with the Widowmaker and then the Junkrat. And then when they transition over, it's weird when they run Wicked recently because Wicked has been the Genji player and Fled has been playing Tracer, which is a strange way of running that actually, because Fled as Genji, they seem to enjoy an approach where all of their players, they like to put them on their middle heroes. So instead of maximizing the benefits of Fletter and putting Wicked on Tracer where he's actually serviceable, they are like, okay, well, Wicked's like a 5 on Genji and Fletter's like a 5 on Tracer, so between the two of them that's 10 points, whereas Fletter's a 9 on Genji and Wicked's like a 1 on Tracer. You know what I mean? That seems to be what's in their head.
So they're kind of trying to patch weaknesses rather than allowing superstar plays.
Yes, which I think is a misplay from them.
Yeah, especially in a meta where a very good Widow or a very good Tracer has an insane amount of impact. I would think that having a superstar player is the better choice there.
And also, I don't really like this strategy of running a Junkrat on Route 66 as well. I think it's pretty difficult to lock off, because Junkrat is great, right? When the team is forced to execute a one-dimensional dive, they don't have the space to be able to set up to dive you from multiple angles. And on some maps, I mean, you can get mad value out of running the Junkrat there because they're all forced to funnel through one choke point. But on Route 66, they really aren't. Other than this first choke, which you can't lock down that well with the Junkrat anyway. The rest of the map is very open for setting up flanks, apart from the third point, obviously.
Okay, so. And this is so you just talked a little bit, just briefly about it, but this isn't the first time or the first map we've seen this kind of counter dive with Junkrat and Widowmaker. Why are we seeing this composition more often when Tracer is, such a must-pick character? What about the Junkrat Widowmaker counter dive is making this composition more valuable than a Tracer, say?
So people used to run Tracer and Widowmaker, and the way that they would run it is you set your Widowmaker really far back along with your backline. This was back in the days of playing before Mercy, but you would even sometimes run it with the Mercy just to get the damage boost and be able to peel for your backline as well. But the point that I'm trying to make is people used to run it with the Tracer, and the way that you would play it is you would bait the enemy team into engaging on you because they're forced to play more quickly when you have a Widow because they need to shut down the Widowmaker. So you force the engagement into you just by the threat of having a Widow, and then you're able to play collapse dive where you jump back onto their dive and try and kill their divers. And I think the Tracer works really well in some situations there when you're anticipating your Tracer to be able to get onto them easily, but people struggled, even though people ran it on maps like Hollywood B, where you can post your Widow really far back. The Tracer can't really be involved in that collapse of the dive very easily. Because
no, not at all.
The Tracer has to get up on the roof.
Yeah, normally when you're running the Tracer Widowmaker, you're having like the 2-man dive where the Diva, like at the very most, is going to defense matrix that Winston's dive in, but it's basically going to be a 2-man dive crew, and the Diva needs to stay back to kind of protect that backline core. So,
And Dallas Fuel were very good at being able to play this Widowmaker style where you're the people who would normally be diving the tanks. So they used to play this with Coco and Effect, and Coco and Effect would kill the people who were trying to dive Taimu rather than going on their own dives. And
Yeah.
so the Junkrat is just great at being able to stand with them on the high grounds and apply a load of peel through the concussion mines. So Seoul Dynasty here have no offensive potential. They're waiting for Dallas Fuel to dive into them and hoping that they can peel them off and kill the divers before they die.
Cool.
Yeah.
Any other comments before we hit play?
I don't think that they were expecting Dallas Fuel to be running such an aggressive style as well. I think you have to keep that in mind because Dallas Fuel are normally a fairly slow passive team themselves, but with OG and now subbing in Rascal for Route 66, you would normally expect them to run their own Tracer Widow style, but I think Seoul got caught off guard.
Now, one other question, because we are going to see OG swap to Winston, I assume. Yep. So we've seen this composition again more this week than in previous weeks, where we have that full dive with the Genji and the Tracer, but instead of Lucio Zen, we're seeing Mercy Zen. So why just recently have we seen much less Lucio Zen and more Mercy Zen, even when we're coupled with Genji Tracer, the double flanker, instead of some sort of long-range dealer like a Widowmaker, as we previously discussed? What is happening recently that's causing Mercy Zen to operate more with the full dive core?
I think it's a product of teams getting better at this anti-dive, which requires your Mercy to go in and heal or damage boost the Genji. It allows you to have a pretty decent ramp on the Genji Dragon Blade, so you can try and get a lot of tempo out of having an ultimate early on, because you can damage boost the Genji. We saw that quite a lot on a few dive maps earlier on in the season. Where the first thing you do is damage boost your Genji and try and build up the Dragon Blade as quickly as possible. But the main focus is having the sustain to be able to keep the divers alive when they go on their dive, and you pretty much see the Zen being left behind on his own a lot of the time when teams play this aggressively. Boston do it very well, actually, where they'll commit 4 or 5 people to the dive, depending on whether Striker can get up into high grounds, whether they have to dive to high ground. Yep. And I think that's the main benefit of the Mercy here is if you're trying to run a Lucio, the Lucio can't really provide the same sustain against a Junkrat or against the team that's trying to collapse and peel effectively.
So it's more of just trying to keep that full dive play style, or the signature of full dive, that really aggressive, deeper dive, but you need the higher healing to deal with the tendency now for teams to be playing more of an anti-dive style.
Yes, yeah, I think so.
Okay.
To crack through Houston, you need to be able to stay alive and deal all of that damage.
Awesome.
I think it's a sustained thing.
If you see anything that you want to talk about, just let me know, and I will pause.
Practice this, obviously. OG, new to the roster. He's been here a bit, though, so they could have been practicing with him towards the end of stage 2. So Fleta will be all the way in the back on Widowmaker. See how they put pressure on him.
Well, that's the question. Are they even going to do that? And Effect
they also have no
shutdown
shutdown for Effect, actually, who's on the right-hand side. You see Effect on the flank really, really deep at the moment. And because they're not running a Tracer...
Is this Effect right here?
No, Effect is behind this hoodoo at the back, underneath the apostrophe S.
Effect is already wrapped around.
So there's Effect in the back line. You see?
Yep.
From there,
so he's taken an early flank around the right-hand side, and normally that would be checked by a Tracer player from the defensive team.
Yes.
And Effect would not be able to get in a flank position like this, but Seoul Dynasty have just given all of the room.
Now, was Fleta positioned on gas and then grappled away, or where was Fleta initially positioned?
I think Fleta was positioned on the left-hand side, so to the left of the Mercy, up on that high ground.
Yes.
Over there, because they're holding their tanks really close and waiting for Dallas to peak the angle or actually contest their tanks, and then Fleta can snipe on them rather than trying to hold the angle of Big Earls. But I dislike this Junkrat setup on Route 66 here, because you're giving so much time and all the space to the enemy team to set up. So Dallas can take their time, get everybody in position, get Effect on a wide flank. Wahid has to look at 3 different angles, and then they're going to dive. It's very difficult to stay alive here, I think.
Right in the end, so he's going to jump in and make the pin. Great dive. The setup on that from the Dallas Fuel was really good. They deal with Fleta, and Miro's already down, so this fight, by all intents and purposes, is over.
Can we just flick back and look at what Miro did there, actually?
Absolutely. Well, you're really putting Miro into the raking him across the coals, aren't
They
you?
deal with Flutter and Miro
Oh, that wasn't far
Yeah.
back. I forgot we're looking at one map. We need to go back further. So here's Miro.
around. You can actually see a
Okay,
glimpse
so
of them
OG
there right at the
primes
end.
on top of the
he's
gas
gonna jump in
station.
and make the
Miro
pizza.
jumps
Great
in.
dive. The setup on that from the Dallas Fuel was really
Okay,
good.
that's just strange though, because normally if you see the dive setting up in that situation, you might want to try and collapse onto them, but then you need Zephyr with you, then you need Wakid actually jumping in and trying to do damage. It's kind of an aggressive play. But I also think like Mirror's just
Zephyr
trying to
did
feel
go
for
there,
Fleta
didn't he?
there.
Though Zephyr goes first, I
You can
think.
actually
Though.
see a glimpse of them there right
So
at the end.
there's Zephyr. So
Yeah, but Zephyr flies back to his backline. I think Zephyr's just trying to put his
He's
defense matrix
Oh, you're
on
right.
Fleta.
I thought he was going to the gas station with Miro, but Miro
Yeah,
goes
he's-
on gas and
yeah.
Zephyr retreats to the wood.
Jump in and make the
Yeah,
pizza.
so it's almost
Great
like Mirror's
dive.
trying to punish the people who are diving Fleta.
Which is a
and
perfectly
Zephyr goes for the
acceptable,
peel as well.
counter diving. They no longer have a tank. They've committed to that location, and they're committing to a location that's in sight lines. But in order to pull that
Yeah.
off, Zephyr would have need to come with him. You're correct. So do you
And
think
I
that's
think just in
more
general-
Zephyr's fault or Miro's fault or communication?
Well, I think that you just play that a different way, because if you see effect, if you're running this strategy and you know that if where effect positions is going to determine whether or not they can dive is how much damage effect or OGE has in them. You can't really poke OGE because he's sat there with Mickey, but what you can do is punish effect trying to get into position. So I would have preferred for Miro to drop back earlier and not take such a forward hold, because then he needs Zephyr behind him, and instead for Zephyr to try and check effect to try and put damage on effect and track where he is around the map. Because if Zephyr's able to get a bit of damage on effect and force him to retreat out of that situation, then that puts a bit of a wrench in the plans of Dallas Fuel's dive. But instead, they just continue to hold that forward angle. I think they just had a poor game plan coming in to be able to deal with a dive comp.
And the best way for them to have contested effect's flank on the far right side would have been to just watch it with Fleta. How would you actually want them to be preventing that flank from effect?
I think when you see him rotate to the backside, then Miro and Zephyr, if they take control of Big Earls, you're blocking the route of attack from effect to your flankers, you're giving the tanks position to push the cart, but you're stopping effect setting up a dive. And then if effect continues to poke in that location, Zephyr's only one boost and one E away from being able to put a bit of damage on him and force him to go hunt a health pack or use his recall. Because as soon as this dive gets set up and is in position, there's no way of being able to stop it, I don't think. So I think the the Seoul Dynasty have to be proactive in shutting it down rather than reactive.
Awesome.
The setup on that from the Dallas Fuel was really good. They deal with Flutter and Mirror's already down, so this fight, by all intents and purposes, is over. As long as I keep that payload
they just
moving,
get
the
picked
Dallas
apart there.
Fuel are going to be on the roll.
Yeah, as
to
soon
the
as
second phase.
Flutter and
And
Miro
this
go
is
down,
a
there's
composition
no hope
for the
at
Dallas
that point.
Fuel that
And then they're changing up their composition because Fleta's not going to be able to really get into the point.
Right? They had a lot of really nice strategies with different things like triple tank and timing with
So
Roadhog
Fleta's
and
off
running
of the
around,
Widowmaker
running
onto a
onto
McCree,
the
but other than that,
And
no
now you
changes.
have something you can definitely go
Zephyr
back
does
to
get
time
out.
and time again
Advanced
that can
Matrix
work.
back in. Are they going to be able to contest? No.
It's gonna be the point A take
That's
and
pretty
it's also
dangerous.
able to get back out.
Especially with Fleta
Challenging
dropping
Fleta
down, they
will
can
fall.
probably
If
get
we
some
came
staggers
into the
here.
Overwatch League, and let's
Oh,
say
Effect
this
gets
is the
dropped.
Dallas Fuel roster, and we said they had the possibility to have an Effect and Rascal Tracer Genji combination.
It's always worth going for that play though, right? Because
Oh,
the cart is
absolutely.
stopped anyway, so you're literally just waiting for
It's
nothing
just
to
free
happen.
distance if you get a stagger there.
The reason
Yeah.
why is because it's
It's
impossible.
a dead
if they
10
wanted to
seconds.
recontest that
Same as
point A,
Iconball.
It's impossible for Widow to get any decent sight lines. You may as well switch to McCree and get aggressive and try and flash people out. Get some burst potential.
See there,
So he's
Miro's
going for the Widow.
using his cooldowns to escape out of fights instead of engage. And this is the kind of more passive Winston play that I think doesn't really have a place in this meta, because you're using your cooldowns to get out and you just make so much space for Dallas Fuel to take advantage of.
Yeah, so like a more aggressive. It's not like a purely passive style. A passive style wouldn't have required the jump to retreat in the first place, but it's that kind of forward stance and then retreating back using a cooldown. That's more of the old style of Winston compared to like there's a lot of the other teams. You heard the phrase tank ping pong the Koreans are using. where the like the Winston and the Diva keep cycling in the same way a Ryan Zarya would in order to manage aggression without being forced to retreat.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I like that ping pong. Okay.
Yeah, so the Koreans call it tank ping pong or aggro ping pong, but it's you'll the teams. Boston even did it to quite nice effect against New York in their last game, in order to hold a stronger frontline position with dive tanks.
The way that I think of Miro is as a tank that likes to disrupt the enemy and hold forward positions rather than a tank that hides and goes for dives. And I think by far at the moment the best way of playing Winston is to
hide and go for dive.
Don't take any poke and then go for dives. Yeah.
That's rough.
There are also so many angles on B of Route 66 where you can go for that kind of play.
Absolutely, yeah. So here we're still not running a tracer for Seoul Dynasty yet. Okay. And so Seoul Dynasty is the team that they're running this anti-dive composition that we talked about, and you mentioned that like their win condition is basically holding a location and being a pain in the ass because they have no frontal dive. They kind of want to force that dive from Dallas Fuel onto them, right? So
yeah,
why is this not succeeding? Other than Miro feeding on first, like second, Miro again retreated and gave up on a piece of territory. But is there any other reason why this composition isn't working out? So if their win condition is get dove on and win, they're getting dove on, but they're losing. So what other than Miro is going wrong here?
I think, well, the first thing to point out is they've only really lost 2 fights, right?
Yes, just they lost 2 points on 2 fights.
Yeah,
so yes.
Exactly. So they're really struggling to get back into engagements, and they're losing them very fast. And I think one of the reasons that they're losing them so quickly is that you see, not so much on this point, because this point works so differently to the rest of the map, but on A and on B, their tanks are holding forwards and receiving poke, and then are having to jump back to defensible locations. Whereas normally when teams play this kind of style, they're not holding forward. They're waiting for the enemy payload to come to them. They're holding the most defensible position you possibly can with this anti-dive peel-oriented setup, which on, teams don't normally play it as much on A, but it would be Big Earls on A.
Yep.
And that would be the bridge. I don't know what you call the bridge on B, actually. But the bridge that goes above where the payload is, that's the most defensible position. Holding around that corner is the most defensible location with a Junkrat there. Seen Houston hold in those locations many times, and it's really successful. But instead, Seoul Dynasty are holding forwards and trying to deny ground that they don't have the ability to cover. Whereas instead, if they wait for Dallas to come to them, Seoul will be in a much better location.
So just kind of drawing a picture to the words you're saying is that think of this wall right here as something defensible like cover or whatnot. Is the way that Miro is playing, we'll just pretend that this is Miro holds close to the cart or at the front of the cart to prevent it moving, and then when he gets pressured from the attacking team, he retreats to this defensible location. But what's happening in this situation is that he's retreating here and needs to stabilize, and the other team is using this as an opportunity to kind of chase them down and re-engage upon them, where other teams in the league playing this same sort of composition or style, instead of playing it like Miro does, what they would do, and like London, for example, Prophet and Gesture, I know are really good at this, is that Gesture will either be on a flank or playing behind cover. Prophet will be on a flank, and then, it may push past this it may be getting distance for free in the early game, but then once they find the opportunity, then they engage together there. So instead of kind of like holding here and being forced to retreat, they hold safe, they give up payload in the earlier stage in order to find either a better opportunity to dive or just be holding at a more defensible location in the first place. Because the only reason that this position would not give the defenders an advantage is if Miro had to retreat to this position and stabilize with the lower health and fewer cooldowns. Is that correct?
And it's not just but it's also not just it's what you're saying about Gesture and Prophet going on flanks, but you don't even need Prophet in these situations. If you consider how Muma plays when Houston run exactly the same composition with the Widow and with the Junkrat, he is still flanking, he is still off on his own thing, and he's just aiming to wait for when the dive comes in. So he waits for the payload to approach. The whole team does. They're just spamming with the Junkrat and trying to get Widow picks and stuff like that, and making sure that they're defending them. The D.Va is playing with the team there so that he can peel the dive away. Coolmat is great at being able to do that. And Muma is off on a weird angle. And Muma's not even going to sync up with the Tracer. He's just going to wait for the enemy team to finally be forced to dive, and then he's going to dive their backline, or he's going to jump in and disrupt people that are having to help. So if Miro, instead of holding forward, takes just the approach of, I'm going to counter dive them once they engage, and trusting the rest of his team being able to hold a location, I think they get way more value out of that. But it's not just that Miro's weak and has to fall back, it's that they know there's no punish coming in from Miro. There's going to be no threat that happens afterwards.
On this third point, no, Miro is already being really aggressive here. Where would you like? Actually, no. Let's just play it. I'm not gonna badger you with more future predictions. Let's see how they actually do it.
I think the C is different as well, because it's just one tunnel you actually can hold forward in this situation. So what we were talking about doesn't quite apply to point C of Route 66.
But OG wasn't lucky or fast enough. Yeah, brought back to life, so that's a worthwhile trade, right? It's not even an ultimate ability anymore to get that res. Mickey goes in deep for Wakid. Rascal gets good healing from Harry Hook and an Orb of Harmony from Unco. Great coordination from the supports to keep this key player up on his feet.
Now Zephyr and Miro are definitely playing very split from one another. Ooh, huge right click into the crit box there. That was over half of his health off of a right click.
Still moving, by the way. It's Unco and Harry Hook are shepherding it towards the end of the map. 4 minutes. Fletter looking very low on HP. Mickey staying alive.
So here's Miro again. Zephyr's not back yet, so he's doing his best to kind of prevent the cart from moving.
Wiki playing off on his own rather than playing with his tanks. Ends up getting picked. Uses concussion mines early for spam instead of for peel.
I was looking, it's like, where is Wakid in this? He's already died.
Wakid goes for a Wakid goes for a flank on the right hand side here to try and draw attention away, which is all well and good, but then you've got to spam just with your, in my opinion, you need to save your concussion mines there for when you get dived on. So you see, I think he throws in his concussion mines early on, and he's not able to protect himself from Rascal when he loses the 1v1.
He did use one.
Oh, actually, he just uses, he uses one, and Rascal actually uses the dash. Okay, he just gets styled on there.
Yeah,
actually.
that was, watching that again, that was just Rascal being sick. Yeah, that was dope. Yeah. That was like, how much was that final burst combo? That was over half his health, wasn't it? That was crazy. Just ruined him. Yeah, I was walking over at like Miro and Zephyr's interaction. I completely missed Wakid.
Look straight to Rascal as soon as he jumps in, and Solar in disarray for the most part. They may have a chance to come back in here, Matt, but it's going to be rough.
It'll be both support ults used by the Dallas Fuel. Miro using Primal Rage, just forcing people around. It'll be Rascal using his Dragon Blade, just searching for players, also trying to dodge the Riptire. The Riptire goes up to the high ground.
Is that the first tire to come out of Wakid as well, I think?
It's the first one that I've noticed or seen. I believe it's the first one, yes.
And that's the Transcendence being brought by Jayhawk. Mickey is not.
That's another issue with the way Soul are playing. They're forcing the fights early on, whereas this composition gets better the later on in the game it is, or rather the later on in the fight, because you want that Riptire available. You want to do spam early on.
Yeah, especially when Riptire, like, what was the stat that came out? Is that Riptire is 70% like fight win percentage or something ridiculous like that?
Something crazy. The
The
ults in general are so important when you're playing peel focused. You want your Winston to have his primal rage so that he can go on flanks alone. You want the D.Va to self-destruct because she's going to be a really pivotal point of the defense.
Do you think this? Do you think the Fleta switch onto Tracer and the Wakid switch onto Doomfist was just for stall, or was there any other reason behind this besides just stall?
Yeah, I think it's stall. I mean, maybe you have slightly more kill potential with them as well, so you're like stalling and being able to kill. You get out faster, but you're also able to dodge around and try and one-clip somebody as Tracer or get a free kill as Doomfist.
Now, I always ask this every time we see such a dominating performance from one team. Basically, there was 4 fights, only 4 fights that occurred on this entire map, and 3 of them went in favor of Dallas Fuel. In such a dominant performance like this, is it that Dallas Fuel played well, or more that Seoul did not play well?
Is it a cop-out answer to say both? I think it's both though, because I think Dallas I think Seoul are coming into it with a poor understanding of how to play this composition. But
Now,
I
now
think
let's stop
Dallas
there.
Fuel is
Let's
setting
stop
up
there.
very well.
Why? This is the big question. Why does Seoul have a poor understanding of how to play their composition? Is this because Miro and Chat's spammed this question at me a couple times? Miro was famously the best Winston. You know, he revolutionized the Winston playstyle very early on in the dive meta. You know, was
Yep.
famously a very popular Winston player. Is it Winston or Miro's old habits not adapting to new Winston playstyles? Is it the coaching staff not preparing the team? Why would Seoul Dynasty not be able to or not know how to play this composition correctly?
I think it's very difficult to say whether it would be a coaching issue because we don't have very much issue into very
Unfortunately,
much
yes.
insight into the coaches. From my point of view, it really looks like Miro is kind of stuck in his old ways of what worked well for him before, and has failed to keep up. Like even in the middle of 2017, after maybe Apex season 2, he had started to fall off a little bit, and it seems like now he's not adapting his playstyle very well. But I think this is also a coaching issue, right? Because if you've got a player like that and you notice that this is a something that they're not keeping up with the rest of the league,
Mm-hmm.
if you've got a guy that used to be the best in the world and now would people put Miro in the top 6? Or
If Miro
like the
wasn't
top
currently
half
in the
of
Overwatch
table?
League, would he recruited to it? I think is a different way of answering
Yeah,
asking that
yeah.
question, right?
And so that falls on the coaching staff for me, the way that I would structure a team, that falls on the coaching staff to be able to prop him up and provide him with the coaching he needs to be able to get his Winston back to that ability. Because it's not like a mechanical thing; it's just an understanding of what's the best way to play the hero. That's what Winston is always about. From what we've heard, he's a very instinctive player as well.
Absolutely.
I don't know
yes.
if you remember Cookie being on Oversight, but he was talking about how
I didn't
he's the
catch
more
that episode.
calculated of the two, and he said that Miro plays Winston in a very instinctual manner. He'll go for things and call as he's doing them, that he's going for things rather than preparing and planning a play for later. And I think that in itself lends credence to the argument that he's kind of playing from his old instincts and not adapting to the new style, perhaps not putting as much thought into how he's playing and just hoping that it'll still work out.
Now, hammering home this, we were talking about how we don't really know if it's a coaching issue because there is such just a lack of transparency. Do you think the lack of transparency into what the coaches and analysts are doing is a good thing? Like, certainly to keep strategies and tactics hidden from the other teams, but in terms of like a viewing experience or in terms of like encouraging the next generation of coaches, do you think just how opaque the current coaching and analysis situation on the teams is a good thing? Should it be improved?
I mean, the question is, what in an ideal world would it look like? And then I think once you answer that question, you can try and push the current system towards that ideal. But I don't really know what the ideal looks like because certainly you want to know what all the coaches do in their teams. So you want to know, are you kind of an analyst that works on the micro of one player? Are you the big picture? Are you the head coach? I'd like to see to know that for all the teams and be able to. We know that for a number of the teams, but we don't know, particularly for the Korean teams, because of the language barrier, what all of their roles are specifically. But then when it comes to stuff like an analyst saying, "Oh, I'm working on developing Miro's Winston" or something like that, I think that once you start getting into that territory, you're maybe giving too much information away to your opponents and stuff. Speaking in broad terms, like I'm the guy that helps people improve, or even I'm always the guy that helps the tanks improve is perfectly fine. But to specify a certain point in the league where you're saying, okay, now we're working on our anti-dive, or now we're working on how Miro flanks or something like that,
That gives away a lot of
too
information.
specific.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. What do you think is the ideal, number of coaches? Because we've have some teams who have really large coaching rosters, and then we have, Kai, who's basically like a one-man crew. Does Dallas Fuel even have an analyst right now? Do we know?
I don't think so. I think
Is
it's
there
just
anyone
Kaikai.
else helping the Dallas Fuel other than Kai? Liquipedia, Dallas Fuel. According to Liquipedia, the coaching staff is
They do have a guy called Violet.
Violet and Peak are assistant coaches. Never heard of them
Okay.
before. So apparently they do have 2 assistant coaches. or at least they're listed on Wikipedia.
Yeah, I think it's also incredibly difficult to be able to tell when a improvement or a decline in a team is due to coaching or due to the players, because the coaches are never going to tell you their plan going into it and set expectations. So when the results are presented, the players often go, "Oh, credit to the coaches," and the coaches go, "Oh, the players did that one." Or sometimes people take credit when it was not their big brain.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it is very difficult to be able to tell unless you're actually there working with them. Like, for example, I know that the Philadelphia guys, having spoken to them, the Philly coaches have a pretty direct input. Their analysts work with them, and I'm pretty confident attributing Philadelphia's improvement from stage 2 onwards to their coaching staff and their players being open to it and players kind of contributing to that discussion. But when it comes to like London's decline, for example,
Wow,
how are you supposed to know?
Were you reading chat? Did you see that question? You must have just somebody like
No, I didn't see.
two people just asked
London
for you to talk about London's decline.
I mean, how do you know what the coach impact is there? There's no way of telling, because you don't know what you don't know if the coaches have the best plan in the world and the players are failing to execute. You don't know if the coaches are saying, take some time off in the middle of the season. You're already pretty much a lock for end of stage playoffs. You've been grinding pretty hard. Just take a bit of a break. I know the guys went back to Korea, so that's not some weird thing to bring up. It's like a reasonable possibility. It's very difficult to tell.
Absolutely.
I don't even know I don't think they have a head coach at the moment in London. I don't think they've actually promoted anybody to that position yet.
Since Bishop Love left, I haven't heard anything. Quickly, before we get back to the second half of Route 66, Los Angeles Gladiators. Now, people saw Fisher replacing iRemix, and the team just suddenly skyrocketed up the standings. Was Fisher the main reason that fixed the main factor that fixed LAG's problems and caused them to jump up the standings, or was there some other factor that you think contributed to Los Angeles Gladiators being able to improve their standings after Fisher joined the team?
I think Fisher was the big reason, but not just because he improved the tank play for the team. I think he taught them how to play dive. I genuinely think he taught them how to play dive. Like, he's a really intelligent player and has a big impact he used a shot call, right, for Congo Panthera.
I was not aware of that, no.
Yeah, so he was a caller. Him and Rascal did the calls. So Rascal was the team leader and Fisher did the shot calls. Yeah. And I think he's literally taught LA Gladiators how to play dive.
You think you've just dragged them by the hand, just like, honestly, this is how we do it.
Drag them by the scruff of the neck up the tables is how I think Fisher's done it with the LA Gladiators. Because when you look at their play in the beginning of the season, they were the most one-dimensional dive team you've ever seen in your life.
100%. Absolutely.
They were just like barrel forward, use all of their cooldowns, and just jump into the enemy.
Yeah, they were like the initial dive. When dive was first became a thing, that's how dive was run initially. It's basically press W, use all your cooldowns, hope to kill something. And dive has become a lot more nuanced as the seasons have gone on to, we're talking about in the way that the Sombra Tracer dive was just run against New York by Boston. They basically have 3 different flank routes that they use to kind of pincer people into a tiny area and then collapse. Like, dive has become a lot more, nuanced.
It's way more complex.
Way more complex. When people are just like, how do you run dive? It's like, well, which variation of dive? Which hybrid of dive? Are you playing counter dive? What is the opponent running? Are they running anti-dive or did they mirror you? Like, there's so much nuance to dive. It's absolutely incredible. Now, the question that I'm going to follow up is that why would it require Fisher to teach the Los Angeles Gladiators dive when they have their own coaching staff? Again, we're going to keep harping on this point, but Deepe, the coach for LAG, is it because of the in-game shot calling that Fisher was required for? Or do you think that, Fisher was better at teaching dive than Deepe? Any idea on that?
It's difficult to say again because I don't know what Deepe does for the team. I've talked to him a couple of times, but not intensively. I think though that Deepe the few things that we've seen from the LA Gladiators seem to be more strategy focused, as in they have like
Yes,
a
they have had some
overarching
really
plan.
great overarching strategies and compositions. We've seen that on
Yeah,
First
and
Point
then some weird
Volskaya.
compositions.
Yeah, we saw that on their Ruins map during their overtime win on Ruins. That was amazing. Um,
Yeah. So
yeah,
if I had to guess, I would say that the coaching staff at LA Gladiators is perhaps more focused on overarching strategy rather than fixing the fundamentals. And Dive is really all about fixing the fundamentals. And honestly, the best people that know how to play Dive are not the coaches. In all honesty, they're the players because they've played the Dive hundreds and hundreds of times. And the coaches, in some sense, playing catch up because the game was still really young. A lot of these coaches didn't have a huge amount of experience, and they're trying to learn from watching the players. Whereas the players are playing it constantly and kind of, even if they can't articulate the nuances, they feel them, or they feel what works and feel what doesn't, and kind of have an intuitive understanding of it if they play at the highest level. And like the players will occasionally say stuff to me that's like that you would never notice if you just watch the game, because you're trying to watch 12 people interact, whereas each of those players is just focusing on their own portion of the puzzle. And so you get a much deeper insight if you're looking at your portion of the puzzle than the puzzle as a whole and trying to figure out what the hell's going on with each portion. So when it comes to the micro of how each hero works in Dive, the players often have a really good understanding if they've played it at the highest level and are actually a pretty cerebral player like Fisher is. So I think some of the players that play on really good Dive teams, some of the Philly players, certainly some of the London players and the NYXL players would be able to teach anybody the intricacies of how that style works.
now, quick question for you, Taimu. Great player or greatest player?
Certainly the greatest player at some point in time. Was certainly, I would say, the MVP. If we had an Overwatch League MVP, but for end 2016, beginning 2017, no, end of 2016, it would have been Taimu.
One last question before we get back to the next half of the Route 66 map. Tymo just subbed in the chat. I'm not sure if he saw that. So, hi Tymo.
I actually saw his clip earlier where he was saying that he it was something that was posted in the competitive Overwatch, and it was like he doesn't think he has a place in the team or something. He thinks his Widow and McCree when they're on are like better than anybody else's in the team. But because of the way the team is structured and because of all of its new players and stuff like that, the clip, devoid of context as it was, seemed to suggest that it's gone past the stage where Taimu finds it comfortable to slot in with them, which is a great point to bring up as well, because Dallas used to kind of center themselves around Taimu and playing the
absolutely
like we were saying before, that Widow style where they collapse.
Yeah, and that's the same sort of thing that got into like Coco's more passive playstyle. Like, people when before Coco got benched, people were talking about how Coco was a much more passive playstyle, whereas XQC was hyper aggressive. Looking to do that kind of like solo carry playstyle. Whereas back during the Envious days with Coco didn't need to be an aggressive playmaker. He just needed to kind of keep the team long enough for one of his superstar DPS to pop off. And that's, one of the more famous ones was after a game where they were like, what was the plan for Nepal or something? And then I forget who said it, but they said that, yeah, our usual plan is just click heads better than the other guys. So, like, at some point, Coco was known as one of the better Western main tanks, if not the best Western main tank back in those days. But yeah, he didn't need to be the playmaker or the aggressive tank space maker like XQC always tried to do. He just needed to kind of keep the team alive until his DPS popped off, and he was pretty good at it.
Yeah, and it's interesting to me that even when they played with XQC, they didn't have this setup where Effect and XQC were that synced up, which was weird, because in theory that would have been a great duo to have, but they never really operated that much as a duo. But now with OG Ian, they seem to do that much more. And I wonder whether that's because the coaching staff have realized that this is the best way to play, or it's because they're both Korean, so they're able to communicate more effectively
Maybe.
or sync that up. But I think that aspect gets a little overrated because I don't think many teams are suddenly switching to Korean comms just for certain Korean players. Like even for the players in Shanghai Dragons, I think they try to just speak all in Chinese. I don't know whether the Korean players midway through a round will suddenly come to each other some specifics in Korean, because then the rest of your team doesn't know what the hell you're talking about. They can't follow up on it. So I think that aspect of like, it's often Korean main tanks and Korean tracers where people talk about the synergy between them. I think it might get overrated a little bit just because you have no idea. You don't listen to the comms. You don't even know whether they're speaking Korean. They might be. They might just be speaking English.
Now,
so
you actually might
knows?
have some insight into this. Those like short 10, 15-second comms clips that we get shown
monkey,
on the stream.
monkey,
No, but like, who decides which 15 seconds of comms to share? Is it the producers, or because some of those comms could be pretty sensitive if they were clipped the wrong thing, right?
Yes, there's a filtering process. So even after they've been selected, they have to go through the front desk to make sure that
do the teams themselves have any approval over the comms?
No, the teams are playing at the time.
Yeah, so like, but there's not a coach saying that yes, you can air that clip.
No, this is no. The coaches are focused on the game. I mean, that would be a terrible thing to get the coaches involved with. It would take them out of the mentality of the game as well.
You could share. So interesting. That's very interesting.
So, but the thing is, it's not like we could just share whatever we wanted because we have an obligation not to share things that are.
So it's kind of your own sanity check, or your own.
Yes, yeah. I mean, the coaches and teams would be incredibly annoyed at us, and that would be the process by which they would get involved. Is that there's supposed to be some trust there that we wouldn't just leak all of their strategies, which I don't think we have done so far. So I think the trust is placed fairly well. But also, it doesn't mean that we can listen to the comms the entire time because we have to be building the segment for the halftime. We have to be listening to the casters so that we can bounce off what a central theme that they have in the game, perhaps. We have to be focused on the game to understand it. I mean, there's two sets of comms for starters, so it's not like you could listen to both teams at once. So yeah, the comms are not really something that gets focused on, and even the most interesting moments can't be shared. So it ends up being that's the reason why a lot of the segments seem uninteresting at times, and they're just focus calls. Is because the comms are great. You get to see the human side of the teams. You get to see them actually playing and what it's like from their point of view. But there are limitations to it if we're being sensible about using them.
I promise this is the last question before we get back to the map. Thoughts on Grim Reality transitioning to an assistant coach for the LAV? Good decision? Or do you think, because Grim's 19, isn't he? 19 or 20? He's on the young side.
Yeah.
Do you think that a pro play experience is, all you need is a coach, or do you think he's going to be focused more on micro play? Is it a good idea for, a young guy with pro experience to become a coach? Just general thoughts?
I believe they said this in their Valiant piece, but this might be something that I heard elsewhere. It might be a Sideshow exclusive. But I think that,
Leaks!
That's
Leaks!
well, no. I think that they really valued his personality on the team. They really valued the way that he's able to pick other people up and keep people focused and engage, have a positive atmosphere. And so they wanted to keep him around in some capacity.
Awesome.
And that made him a perfect pickup to be a coach. And so I don't know exactly what his role will be. Perhaps he'll be focused on the micro, but I don't think it's a shock to anybody that Grim Reality was not played the entirety of the season. So if they want to keep him around, it made sense for it not to be as a player, I think, is the nicest way to put that.
Awesome. I'm going to hit play and shove a few bites of food in my mouth. So if you want me to pause it, I will certainly do so. But I'm going to just probably be silent for about a minute or so while I try and get some food in my stomach. Okay.
Go wild.
Right? They just have
Cram
so
that
many
in.
talented players. It's just, if you figure it out, that's what it looks like.
Unco, we get the joke.
Overwatch League thus far, playing with a stable roster, with a stable main tank, with a dedicated strategy. Not really. I mean, none of these guys have.
I mean, your fates as an off-tank are often tied to those of your main tank. Yeah. I see what you two are getting at. Yes, Unco, we get the joke. Are you really doing that? You're not hitting your crouch key over that icon.
I love how Uncle's just looking at it.
No, you're not.
Shaking their head. Great.
This is where they're just
Okay.
BMing the
Lot
LA
of
Valiant.
headshots,
The spray game is always the
Language
most
these
fun
two
part,
communicate.
right?
Look, you've got one man
It's
who's a primary
fantastic,
French
yeah.
speaker, one man who's a primary Korean
I,
speaker. So that's how they
I was
communicate. Not
I
sure
was
that
waiting
they
for
even
Uncle
know
to
I-
teabag it,
Sorry,
but
no,
no,
sorry,
apparently
just-
not.
just
Apparently
gonna
that
get
was
memed on
a
for the
step too
time being,
far.
bro.
So he
Here
just
comes
shook his
Seoul
head at it.
Dynasty
and
out of the
then nodded.
gates.
So this is kind of strange as well. The Seoul Dynasty playing the same composition on offense. It's much easier to predict that the defensive team is going to engage into you because they have to at some point. They can't just poke you down because the cart is progressing. So they have a time limit on actually diving you. But the issue is, again, you're playing around the cart and you're giving up all the space to the opposing team, and you still need somewhere to position your Widowmaker. So this is this can work really well at the beginning of Route 66 because you're positioning around underneath this bridge here with the Hoodoo, and Flutter's going to try and get picks on people, and they're going to be forced to dive Flutter, and you're going to try and peel them away, and they can only really come from one angle at the beginning. But later on, as things progress, there are a lot of angles to engage from.
Now, Jayne switching, of course, off. But we have a Junkrat and Widowmaker combo here. Very indirect damage in Junkrat, very direct damage in Widow, about as direct as a sledgehammer to the face during plastic surgery. I think you get the idea.
And you see that? I mean, this is what puzzles me as well. If you just go back 20 seconds, if you don't mind. No, not 20 seconds, 10 seconds. Miro's using his cooldown here to peek. You don't see that from many Winstons. They try and hold on to their cooldowns as long as they can. They have their Diva peak. Their Diva uses boosters and or sometimes not even boosters, but just the defense matrix to peek an angle and call what's happening. And they're the ones scouting. Because if your Winston does it, he has to use cooldowns and he takes poke, so you're never ready to engage.
Absolutely.
So I don't really understand why Miro's the guy that's doing this kind of thing.
Now, in this kind of
puzzles-
situation, you'd be expecting Fleta to get the recon?
I'd be expecting Zephyr to, actually. I'd expect
Oh.
Zephyr to be pushing up to the choke point and using the defense matrix to peek in most situations. Although, obviously, you're going to set Flutter up to find the angles. But you want somebody to peek before Flutter to try and figure out where everyone's playing, I think. Especially at this point where you don't know if they're running a Widow of their own. So, I mean, maybe this is a next level play and Miro's just jumping up hoping to take a big fat headshot and charge Gambler's ultimate, but I don't think that's what he's doing. I don't think this is a big brain play. I
Man,
think it's
and
just-
there was like a period for like a solid 2 weeks where every single time a Winston fucked up his primal, chat would be like, probably just feeding so that we can charge the support ultimates. Chat was pretty sure that they had pro play figured out that if a Winston fucked up his primal, it was because we were just like 900 IQ recharging support ultimates. Tactical feeding.
Yeah.
Which has happened
Genius.
before, right? Soul actually did
Oh,
do
yeah.
that a couple times during stage 1, and I think we saw it a few
LA
times.
Valiant started it, actually.
LA Valiant. I thought Soul was actually
Yeah.
the first one that did it.
They may have copied Soul. I'm not sure. But I know that LA Valiant tweeted
Yeah, he was
at me annoyed when I did a little highlight piece about it.
Oh, really? So when did LA beat? Because it was like halfway through stage 1 that I remember
Yeah.
Soul did
Yeah,
it.
playing Anubis on stage 1.
Yeah.
It may have been Soul first. I'm not sure. I just know.
Just LAV got angry at you on Twitter.
in a joking way. The
Oh,
MLs
okay.
tweeted at me like, why the fuck are you giving our secrets away?
Cool. Let's keep going.
A Junkrat and Widowmaker combo here. Very indirect damage in Junkrat, very direct damage in Widow, about as direct as a
Again, he's
sledgehammer to the
upset.
face during
I
plastic surgery. I
don't
think you
really
get the
understand
idea.
that at all.
And I think what Dallas is trying to
Jay
do
Hong
here
nearly dies
is
trying to
they're just
1v1
trying to
Mickey,
pressure
push him out of position. Crazy stuff. See, now Miro's just taking all the poke in the world. Like, what is he doing? It's so weird to me how Seoul Dynasty play this. It's so strange. Because they put their tanks in positions where they can't collapse. Like, your whole thing is, you are forcing the enemy to engage because you have payload progress and you have the threat of the Widowmaker. If you're playing a slow composition, you need either poke to force the enemy to engage because otherwise they're just going to slowly lose health and die, or you need a pick potential. So poke or pick forces the enemy to engage into you, and then you can peel them off effectively or collapse
I
onto
like
them.
that.
And instead, they're using their their cooldowns so that they know there's no collapse potential. They get Jayhong weak, so they know that the Mercy is supposed to heal him up. And then Wicked and Fleder are not even in position. I mean, this boggles my mind when I'm watching this. It's like, what is Seoul's game plan? Why are they not being able to execute it properly?
I really like that phrase "poker pick," forced to engage. It's just such a simple way of last time Elk blew my mind with one statement. I think that's the if anything else I'm going to take away that line is just concepts that have existed. That's nothing revolutionary. It's just how simply you were able to put it. I think that's really insightful there. Now, we actually do get to see a replay of Miro feeding. Let's see.
Sort of running for the heels. Let's see how this went down. Miro jumped on immediately.
Did he take a headshot?
Okay, that's... God bless Miro.
Oh, man. So
I'm not really sure.
Mechanical error,
but could you just rewind a little? Because I want to see how he takes so much poke damage.
Yeah, he got chunked for like 300 damage there, and I didn't see it either.
Because this is what I'm wondering about.
The rest of Seoul already.
So, because Dallas Fuel doesn't have... Was it a right click from Unco?
Sort of running for the heels.
Nope.
And he just gets the Discord up.
Right there. Sure he cleans up Jayne as well.
Well, it could have been the right click into because right click fired the Discord after the right click arrived, and Discord orb has a faster travel time than the destruction orbs, right? Chad,
I just mean that he isn't taking extra damage from elsewhere because he has a Discord.
Can I actually slow this down? No, I can't slow down the MLG player.
Wait, are you saying that if you right click and then Discord, because the Discord flies faster, the effect applies to the right click?
At close range, you can't land Discord before the destruction orbs. At long range, Discord orb travels faster than destruction orbs, so it can land
I did not know. I thought that was just a visual thing. I did not know that it actually had
the Discord orb is an actual orb that travels, which a lot of people do not know. It has a travel speed.
Cool.
So I could try and look it up, but I'm sure chat can look up the travel speeds of the orbs.
Sort of running for the heels. Let's see how this went down. Miro jumped on immediately, but look at Fleder's health bar.
Yeah, but it's the positioning that bothers me here, because Miro's at the angle, aggressive again, like contesting the tanks. And this is fine if you're trying to buy space for Fleder to put him in position, but it means you take so much poke damage, whereas if you play Fleder as the bait on the end of your hook, you can get much more value out of killing the dive, I think.
Now, I meant to pause it. Now Miro went to go stage on gas station, so he's used his cooldown once again to stage on the high ground. Is that?
And this is, well, they've got the pick, so this is a different situation, right? This is not an engagement. This is solidifying your position after a pick, and this is something that Seoul are pretty good at. But Seoul are very bad at punishing. By playing aggressively. So they always seek to solidify their position after a pick, which is a much slower, in theory, safer approach, but they never punish people by going very aggressive once they've got a pick. If you have a pick, you have a massive advantage in a fight. It's I think of it as exponential rather than being additive. So it's not like you have 6 players, it's like you have the player's power, but to the power of 6. So if you remove a player, you're like having an exponential decrease in the ability of your team because of all the interactions between them. And so if they get the pick on Rascal here, they should, in my opinion, should be going really aggressive, even just with their tanks and Gambler, to try and get as much punish as they can. And Wicked can run forwards as much as he can, and Fleder can swing out into wide positions because he's not worried about a punish. And they should be trying to demech people as much as possible, or get an extra kill and really try and punish. And Seoul always just seek to cement their position and hold territory for the next fight, which I think is a poor way of playing. Actually, you want to be as aggressive as possible, as punishing as possible.
We actually saw New York running that same sort of strategy where they kind of try and take and solidify position instead of more like spreading out and applying flanking pressure, or applying pressure from the sides that they have to deal with multiple possible angles of attack as well as just sight lines. Now, just for your own information, Destruction chat tells me moves at 80 meters per second, and Discord moves at 120. So very fast, probably the fastest projectile in the game.
I wonder what is then the mental maths to calculate the distance that you can fire a right
the maximum orb itself, the maximum, like, you can't apply Discord or Harmony past 40 meters. So just using the maximum theoretical, you'd have to be half a second, or no. So
I'm not even going to attempt to do this mental math.
yeah, somebody in chat will do it. But anyway, and then there's the other. Does this mean that the 15% slower right click for Zen could actually help in long reach volley kills? No, because it's not the orbs are moving slower on the right click. It's that their rate of fire is slower. So the Zen nerf will actually, hurt it, because you won't actually be able to apply that Discord until later into the right click volley. So the first couple orbs will hit without Discord based on the nerf itself. Third of a second for Discord to arrive. Yep. So it'll take third of a second for a Discord to arrive and half a second for the destruction orbs to land there. So yeah, at 30 to 40 meters range, you should have Discord orbs arriving before right clicks.
Great. A great time to learn this knowledge when it's been like this in the game forever, just as it's about to be used.
Just as it's about to change. Fantastic.
I really feel like this is the constant struggle with Overwatch. I learn intricacies about a meta just as a patch is about to come, and then I'm like, well, I'm never going to be able to use that again.
Yep. Discord used to be 30 meters per second. That must have been in beta. It wasn't like that in Season 1. Then again, did I play Zenyatta in Season 1? I don't remember. Anyway, interesting knowledge to know that will never become useful since Zen's getting nerfed. Nice.
Beck's doing here is trying to recover the situation by flanking, but Fleta knows it. He was looking for effect in the backline and domed him.
Might have another fight here. Here, Dallas.
We've
Seems
had
like
3 Dallas players back up. I think some Rascals there. Yes, you will have another fight.
Yeah,
Yep.
I mean, Mickey could launch a self-destruct over the top, and like OG could jump in here, but do you have insight?
Last person out the door is dead, probably, because Fleta's going to see them. Oh, okay! Switches right to Riptire.
I love Rascal.
Let's see what else he can do, though. Not a lot. Wakid turns him into
I
smithereens
suppose
now.
if we're nitpicking,
Remote
maybe
mine
the
thrown
tire
in, but
should
that's
have
the
come
pulse
in
bomb
that
effect.
direction, or just stalled them rather than because if you stalled them with the tire there, just by running it around the entrance to that cavern, then you get free push.
Yeah, right. You got up to 10 seconds to just threaten them constantly with that tire.
Yeah. And at some point there, they have to block the cart with somebody who will die. So most teams at the moment are committing their diva to it because if they don't take damage from anybody else, they can potentially get rehealed, or they can remake if they have self-destruct. I mean, it's just not a pick, right? If you can keep them alive, they might theoretically be able to get back in mech. It's better than losing somebody. And they can also do damage to it as it approaches. But now Seoul have to get to the cart that's at the end, and this is the situation where I was saying at the beginning of the map, you have so many different angles, and you're trying to approach this PL composition is never going to be able to pass through. So now they have to transition over to dive and try and make that work.
Now, Miro, I paused it like 2 seconds before Miro jumps. Since we are focusing on Miro, I'm going to play it, we'll look at the dive, and then you talk about it.
Forces him back yet again.
What happens there? I mean,
I thought you'd be interested in that one.
I mean, like, why is he using his? This is what, like, normally when you watch a game, you can tell what somebody's thinking or what they're going for, even if it's not correct. But I am so confused when I watch Miro because I just don't know what he's going for. Like,
now, Rascal was
he trying to pressure
Rascal was
somebody off the
there
high
and he was
ground?
harmonied. Yes, so Rascal was there, harmonied, but Rascal did still have
well,
dash.
that's such a waste of a cooldown as well.
Yes, but look, watch Rascal, follow Rascal. This is kind of like the answer to the question. So Rascal, I don't think he swift strikes because he gets over here using wall climb, right? So he's in that location, and then he does dash. He did dash to try and finish off
To try and kill
Fleta.
Fleta.
So he did commit dash. I missed that the first viewing. So he...
Okay, so they're trying to get the kill on him.
They're trying to get Rascal. Yeah.
And then where does he go? He just gets out.
Yeah, he did the...
Okay, that's not as puzzling as I thought it was.
Okay, yeah. I didn't see the dash onto Fleta. That's what I missed because it was hidden behind the scoreboard, right? So, interesting though. Oh, did I not put the guest listing up? Oh, I apologize, Sideshow. Nobody knows who you are. There we go.
That's all right. They'll probably just think I'm Bren anyway.
Mickey and I would hang around in this fight. He was desuited, and Jayne pushing very deep with that transcendence.
And Mira commits Primal Rage to engage straight afterwards. So
make quick
he's
work out of
not even punished for using, feels no effect for using his cooldown early on to try and get the kill on Rascal, because he can pop his primal rage and still be able to engage with it. And Wiki's on the floor to be able to clean up, so that was pretty crisp. That was alright.
Right back at effect.
I like it.
Pulse bomb does get deflected there. It doesn't pick up anything, but
More of the traditional dive style where Miro plays with his team. Miro almost always plays with his team. Unusual for a team at the top, as we were saying. Whereas Dallas, look at OGE now. He's like hiding on the right-hand side, waiting for a flank, trying not to take poke, though they have spotted him. I suppose that is the punish for Winston's who play that.
That was the same kind of punish that we saw Miro take, right? He tried to take a little bit more of aggressive position, gets spotted by Wakid, and instead of taking poke, OGE immediately retreats to stabilize.
Well, I wouldn't say this is a similar situation, really, because OG's in a position there where he wants to get a flank. He's not really trying to hold ground. And so the rest of his team is still in a very defensible location. They're like holding on the defensive, everybody else. So he's just able to that's a ridiculous play. I remember that from the highlights.
Okay, I'll pause it while you can keep talking.
Yeah, so I think this is the way that most teams would normally play it. They play back on the bridge with everybody else.
Yep.
They have the gambit of holding OGE forwards with effect in a position where they can pincer and get some kind of counter dive. And then even if your Winston is spotted, you can retreat and kite. Whereas what I saw from Seoul was, I guess what I'm saying is the diva position is the biggest thing, because Miro and Zephyr were trying to hold forwards as a duo and really deny the space. And so they're both forced to retreat when that doesn't work, when there's too much poke applied to one or two of them.
And whereas you're seeing Dallas Fuel with OGE, he's kind of holding on the flank, whereas Mickey is playing with the core of the team.
And so the positive for OGE is that they're able to execute a really nice counter dive if it works out, and he'll be able to pincer and it'll be a cool play. The positive for Miro is just that they hold the ground. There's going to be no attempt at a dive actually coming in. They're just attempting to hold ground. So the positive is already higher for me in OGE's gambit than Miro's. And the negative for Miro is worse because he's brought his diva with him to try and hold that space rather than OGE, who can escape to the rest of his team. And they still have a defensible position with their diva, and they're able to kite it effectively.
Okay.
But for me, that play from Dallas is better than Seoul's, even though it didn't quite work out and he was spotted.
And this play from the highlight reel, I haven't seen this before. So what the hell is happening?
So they get the DMEC on Zephyr, and Zephyr uses his self-destruct. They all hide inside the self-destruct to try and keep themselves alive because because you have to run away from a self-destruct, right? Or you'll die.
Usually.
And OGE is just like, mate, I know the time to kill. I'm going to be able to get all 3 of these picks before I blow up, and just trades his life for a 3K.
That's fantastic. Cool. Like, you know, like you can't shoot through an exploding diva mech, so you can use it as cover here. But OGE, of course, with the piercing weapon, effect can't do shit. But OGE, that's awesome. Oh man, the timing on that.
Yeah, it's so tight, isn't it?
That's good.
Still so committed.
That was really well done. Now, since we looked at the score here, we know that Dallas Fuel holds them here, right? So 2.5 minutes holding on second phase of Dorado. Now, Dallas Fuel has an ult advantage here, but what else should we be looking out for other than ult economy currently being in favor of the Dallas Fuel for them to hold streets after basically 3 minutes, which is, not common, I would say, on Route 66.
What I would be paying attention to here is how Seoul approach the dive and what their aims are. I think if you try and execute a really a nice dive with somebody flanking, we really didn't see the setup for that fight at all because the camera was on effect as they were coming in. But if I was watching like an overhead map view for this game, which I think I was at the time, but I've forgotten how it went, I would be asking, how are they aiming to get onto Unko and force out his ultimate? How are they applying pressure to try and force out Harry Hook's ultimate so that they have gamblers and Jayhongs to initiate in with?
So here,
so they're going on
and they're moving as 6, aren't they?
Yes, they've taken their supports with them, I think.
And effect is kind of like bringing up the rear, chasing, and here you can decide Dallas Fuel is probably going to rotate, aren't they?
So Dallas's tanks, OG and effect, are playing how most teams played. They hide, and if if for example Seoul engage here, just kind of straight up the gut, and leave one of Gambler or Jayhong behind, or even both of them, then OG in effect are gonna Effect's probably gonna drop down and go from the back through that cavern to the left hand side. And get on them at the same time as OG dives them. Basically, the Winston Tracer on the second point of Route 66 are often going behind and trying to get onto your backline and disrupt. Fraggy and Stillo do this really well on Route 66. One of the reasons why they're so excellent when Snillo's in the lineup is he syncs up with Fraggy very well. And OG in effect are playing this. And this is a big departure from the norm for Dallas Fuel because they very rarely with their previous tanks would make plays like this. So I think this is one of the reasons it works out so well for them. But Seoul Dynasty have a double defensive support ultimate. So in theory, they can make something happen. But I also don't understand why they've got the Junkrat, to be honest. I mean, that's not a dive hero. What are you aiming to do with that? You have to play aggressively on second.
Did you see the New York-London matchup where New York played the Junkrat into a pharmacy composition in one shrine? Did you see that map?
Yes, I did see that map. I'm trying to remember which one it was. New York against Houston.
Or
right?
It was New York against London because it was
New York against. No, so didn't you say New York? New York against
New York London on Nepal Shrine. So it was Hureg.
When was this?
Oh,
this was just yesterday.
Last week? No, it was last week. I think it wasn't this week. It was the week previous. But yeah, we are seeing Junkrat run in a lot more scenarios, even when it doesn't quite make sense. And New York did beat London. So London was running, I don't remember what their second support was, but they were running like traditional pharmacy dive. I don't remember if they were Lucio or Moira as their second support. But then New York ran dive with Mercy Junkrat Tracer. And they won against the pharmacy, no comp swaps, 100-0. And it's an interesting map to take a look at. So we are seeing some very non-traditional Junkrat maps see Junkrat play.
The thing that confuses me about this is with the sound barrier, you have a time window to take advantage of it, and the same with the Transcendence, I suppose, as well. But both teams have Transcendence. So the Soul's advantage is time sensitive, so they need to make use of the barrier blade. So I don't really know what Wiki's purpose is going to be. Maybe to peel off OG in effect after the support ultimates disappear. You've got like a appealing hero at a time when you are time sensitive and therefore have to play high tempo. You have a limited window, so you have to play aggressively, but you're also playing with a Junkrat. So my only thought here is Wiki's going to stick with the supports after the Transcendence fails. When most people try and target the Zen after the Transcendence, he's going to try and peel them away. That's my only prediction for what would happen here, unless something groundbreaking occurs from Seoul.
Cool. Let's give it a shot.
The payload, we get to like a 45-second point in the game where they're going towards point B. Then you'll have ultimates online for the Dallas Fuel.
And they also miss out on the tracer pressure of a flank or a pincer, so it's very one-dimensional that they're going around this side. All six, as you were saying.
Now you keep using one-dimensional as like a bad thing. Is there any situation in which a one-dimensional assault is the right choice or the best choice? When is a one-dimensional attack, the correct decision? Also, T2 is this fight, I guess, since we're just gonna not be able to see the setup.
Yeah, I have no idea what really happened there. They used a Transcendence randomly. Yeah.
Let's see if we can see why Jayhong tranced. Zephyr's low. Trance to
they already lose Gambler, and Jayhong uses Transcendence.
And Zephyr was low.
Yeah. I think it's. I mean, the setup has already gone poorly here. They feel invested. They know that Rascal's going to have his blade if they don't make use of it. I don't know. I just think this is poor play from Seoul. But in terms of the one-dimensional aspect, almost always you want to have some kind of setup for your dive. And normally that will come in the form of the Tracer being... I like to think of Tracer as a bit of a sheepdog. So you harass people into a sheepdog.
Okay.
Yeah, you know the concept of a sheepdog, right?
Nope.
They round up sheep.
Okay.
That
makes sense.
They're not farm sheep in America.
I'm Canada.
It's
too cold.
Country.
We just import plants
Canada,
and watch them die.
That's true. So you have they round up sheep by like barking at them and not really nipping at their heels, but like scaring them into position, and then that scares them into like into different fields. It's how you move a huge herd of sheep from one field into another. So the tracer is like harassing people and pushing them into position for the rest of your team to dive on, or they come in at the exact same time as somebody else and have like a pincer. But in terms of a really one-dimensional attack, if the tempo has to be super fast, then you're better off just kind of getting in their faces early. But in general, I think just being predictable and the defending team knowing exactly where you're coming from is almost always a bad thing. If you can avoid it, you probably should.
Now, what would have caused, so like you said that this was poor play from the Seoul Dynasty, that they committed ults after Gambler got pulse bombed.
Yeah.
What, other than just like poor play, because that doesn't speak to specific errors or anything that, you know, could be corrected. If you were a coach or if you were trying to tell the Seoul Dynasty what they should have done differently, was it a communication error that Jaehong didn't realize Gambler had died? Was it, you know, poor planning? What was the main factor that caused Seoul Dynasty's play here to be so poor?
I'm really not sure what the root of the issue is, but from the outcomes are poor. So in most situations, losing a first pick is devastating for losing the fight.
It's like 78%.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
And the outlier cases are normally when you've already kind of got in position anyway, and you're mid-execution and you lose a player, especially when you're playing dive. Like that is forgivable. If you lose a Lucio after you've already got in position and you've executed, assuming he doesn't have sound barrier, you're like that's not too bad. You can still just play faster, and so you've lost your sustain, so you have to play faster, but you can still make the best of it and possibly win if your dive is better. But in this situation, they've lost one of their key win conditions, which was the fact that they have 2 defensive support ultimates compared to 1, and they're in a poor position having positionally, as in they haven't, from the look of it, got into a place where they can even play faster and dive and try and make use of the Transcendence. So this Transcendence fails to help them play aggressively. It ruins their ult economy for the next push, and there is no value to staying alive here. You want to be wiped as soon as possible, in my opinion, if you lose Gambler, because Gambler's holds one of your keys to victory. He holds that sound barrier, which you need really to be able to win this fight. If you lose Gambler and try and push 5v6 when the enemy has Transcendence, I think that's a lost fight that you're throwing ultimates into.
And especially with 56 seconds left, if this fight drags out too long, they're going to be rushed to set up the final fight with ult disadvantage.
Yeah, so if I was a caller in this situation, and Lord help the Seoul Dynasty if I was, I would be truly appalling on whatever hero they put me on, and I'm sure would call things horrifically in the heat of the moment. That's the benefit of hindsight. But
that's the reason why we sit at a desk, not on stage,
exactly,
right?
Exactly. Very good at analyzing things after the fact. But yeah, if you lose Gambler early on in the fight, I think this is just a hard reset. I don't think this fight is winnable and should be invested into.
Do you think that Affect's death is making this more of like an okay decision?
It depends on the timings of everything. I mean, I don't know the exact timing of when the Transcendence came off, but from first glance, it seemed to me like the fight was a no-go early on. Could you wind back, say 5 seconds, and we'll be able to see the timings of everything as they happen? Because it seems to me like Jaehong has enough time to process the fact that Gambler dies.
I felt like that was the case as well.
Yeah. So it's a good 3-5 seconds, something like that. And it does seem to be triggered by the fact that they find the pick on Affect. Maybe they think they can find the pick on Rascal, but and heal up both of the tanks. I have a fairly perhaps safe approach to Overwatch in that I tend to trust the numbers on first pick. If you lose a first pick and you're not in position, I'm calling a reset in really key.
And like not only that, but of course, like if Unco didn't have Trance, I would give this more credit, right? But
yes,
So
but Dallas Fuel have all the time they need.
Yeah, absolutely. So you trance second, you win. I would love to see the stats on that. If both trances were used, I want to see how often like the second trance wins. That'd be a cool stat. But
you can get that stat on Winston's Lab actually. I don't know it off the top of my head, but you can find it.
I
They
might have to look that up.
everything.
But yeah, so like Jayhong's going to get a lot of value here, but I talk about this when I'm doing like individual VOD reviews or critiquing people's play or coaching them. Just using the trance to delay your inevitable deaths isn't enough. The trance has to be part of contributing to a win condition. So like keeping yourselves alive during a wipe ultimate when you're on defense, sure, but just delaying the inevitable when you've already lost gambler, Transcendence will keep you alive when the correct decision would be presumably to reset. But let's see how Seoul actually plays this.
And if here they're able to force the Transcendence out of Uncode, they are getting more than they should, I think. I think even for Unco here, there's no reason to use this Transcendence because Seoul Dynasty were not in a position.
Nope.
But
they still do
if
have
that's what
beat
Seoul were
blade, but now
going
they
for-
can't use it because Unco has trance still.
Yeah. So maybe what Jaehong's hoping for there is that a lot of ultimates get blown in that fight anyway, and Dallas Fuel kind of get roped into it, because it's better for the attacking team of Seoul Dynasty here if there are no ultimates on the board. I think any ultimates confuse the situation and add a lot of confounding variables to whether or not you can take the fight. So maybe they were just trying to flush out ultimates there, but again, if you're smart and you're Unco, you're not going to pop that over.
Is there any win condition here for Seoul, especially now that Zephyr just got demacked?
Having an incredible blade, Unco not popping his Transcendence and getting picked really early. I mean, no, not really.
Yeah.
It seems like a pretty lost fight. They don't have positioning. They get demacked. The sound barrier has to come out early to try and keep Zephyr alive. I suppose the tire was a win condition if they get some crazy tire, but it's all kind of clutch plays at that point.
That was quite the hold.
Yeah.
Let's take a look at Los Angeles Gladiators next.
Sure.
Awesome.
I would say exceeding expectations on their
Let's
first
take a
show in
look
OG.
at
They are doing
Seoul Dynasty versus Los Angeles Gladiators. Let's look at a map the Los Angeles Gladiators won. Do you want to look at Blizzworld? Comment about Blizzworld, the map?
Sure, yeah. Yeah, let's do that.
Let's do Blizzworld. So just
So this one was
in
kind
general,
of strange.
yeah,
Because,
go ahead. Just take it away.
yeah, this one was kind of strange because Fleder was out ill. So that's just the caveat that I want to point to is that they're probably not preparing to play with Fleder in this situation. I can't remember the final score, actually. Did they end up winning this? I think they did.
Gladiators win this map.
Oh, do they? Okay.
Chat wants you to go over quickly what we learned about Seoul by watching that Route 66 map.
Yeah. I think early takeaways, having only watched one map there, is that Miro plays a lot with his team rather than off on weird angles like a lot of other Winstons. They struggle to set up.
And that was what you were
flanks.
expecting, right? You were expecting.
Yeah. Just from the eye test, yeah. Just from watching the games live, it seemed like that was the case. And tends to play more of a disruption style rather than a hard dive. And also they're playing with a Junkrat in strange situations, I think.
Mhm.
And I really don't think they
Now
know
that
the best way of
situation,
playing it.
again, would like to point out, is not unique to Seoul. So
Yes. Yeah. I think Houston might have gotten their head on, honestly, because they struggle so much against Jake's Junkrat. I think they're trying to incorporate it, and perhaps they don't quite understand.
that's
why
an,
it's
that's
so
an
good.
interesting thought because they did struggle against Jake's Junkrat quite a bit.
Oh yeah, a huge amount.
Now, what is it about Jake's Junkrat, or is there anything about Jake's Junkrat that makes it, unique in the Overwatch League? Is it anything to write home about?
I think he is the best Junkrat in the league. I think the team plays around it really well. Cool Matt is also excellent. So Cool Matt and Jake have very good synergy with how they play around each other. And then you have Moomer on flanks. I think a lot of it just comes down to the positions that he takes, and his use of concussion mines is very good to be able to peel people off. Quite a lot of it is the micro, but also the fact that his team backs him up so much. They have both healers and they have Cool Matt all ready to peel for him at a moment's notice, and then they have Muma who can go on go on solo flanks and still be able to fend for himself with Primal Rage. The Hanamura game in particular comes to mind actually when they were playing against Seoul and they couldn't push Hanamura B with the Junkrat.
Mm-hmm.
I think Seoul were previously a team where they liked to force the enemy team to make rotations and benefit from that. So they take one side of the map or they push one angle. They know that the counterplay to that is for the enemy team to rotate people into X angle, and then they either find people out of position when the enemy team is rotating, or they punish them in some kind of other way for their positioning. But you don't really rotate when you play a Junkrat. You just kind of hold your ground. So I think they struggle with that.
Now, looking at these compositions, LAG running that same kind of Junkrat Widowmaker, counter dive that we looked at last map. So let's skip over what LAG is doing. But Seoul Dynasty finally running Wakid on the Widowmaker instead of Flutta, which is a bit, he's sick, but still.
Yeah.
Would you pick Wakid to do the Widowmaker?
I'm not sure. I've never really seen Wakid's Widowmaker because you would never not run it in normal situations. But I think the Tracer is more important than the Widow on this map.
Absolutely.
It's not like Volskaya where you have big sightlines and both teams are just going to set up and see what happens with the Widow, and then there's like a little mini game happening between the Widow. I think the Widow here is more to force the hand of the LA Gladiators to play a little more aggressive or push them out of position. I think it is more. It's like Wakid's going to lock down a position and make the hold of the LA Gladiators fit within certain sightlines, and then Munchkin and Miro and Zumba can then get either a flank from the right-hand side where you go all the way around into the defender's spawn. Just be able to battle across the point.
Just need to... Oh, never mind. Mods did show up. We just had a spammer show up. Sorry about that. Ham's on it.
Munchkin or Wakid is going to run something different on the defense. You have to imagine he'll be going back to projectile. Anyway, we'll see how they try to crack this as both teams.
So Seoul going right side.
How do you deal with hydration? Who's going to be
Munchkin's already flanking, getting kind of looking like he's getting into a position.
I actually really like Blizzard World A as well as a point.
Blizzard World A is actually pretty decent. Yeah,
I think A has a lot of potential for some cool strategies to develop. It's got that high ground. I actually think of it a little like just the shed of Volskaya, the way that people play around
exactly.
it.
Yep.
It seems like that, but
it's kind of like that, but without the parallel high grounds that basically forces the Widow. So the parallel high grounds is just so strong for Widowmaker. It's basically demanded to be run. But
it's a cool first point. I like it.
Absolutely. A lot of different angles to attack.
That bothers me.
That was a weird movement. I don't think I've ever seen that movement before to dodge shots.
Yeah.
Usually we see the 180 kind of. Oh, babies. Sorry, Sideshow. Gotcha.
Yeah, the little Widow v Widow had you all tickled in the right places there, Jay.
Sorry.
But this is a position where they often set up the Widow v Widow battle. If you get the advantage there, you force people down onto the low ground. They have to play within certain sightlines. And Miro and Zephyr, I think, have to just chip away at the tanks on the point. It's a weird map. I'm not quite sure how they're gonna push this.
Yep. Oh, and Wakid just getting dominated by Surefour. I hope we see more of that. Do we get to see more of that? Do you?
I have no idea. I can't remember.
Cool.
Surefour's going to take down Jayne, though.
Takes out Jayne too.
Yep. So normally, I mean, they lost Munchkin early on in this fight, right? And I think he's only just properly come back. The Tracer is the big threat, or somebody making a flank onto the high ground at the back is the big threat for Blizzard World. So if you're able to push somebody behind, not quite all the way behind, like Munchkin is hiding in a bush right now, but if they get up onto the defensive high ground, they're in a decent position. This is just a bit of a reset from the Seoul Dynasty, I think, because they lost, they demiked Zumba and then killed him. But they've got Munchkin in position now, so that's the first part of their setup is complete. I think. Is Munchkin still there?
I think Munchkin reset as well.
It's been a rough go for it so far.
I don't see him.
No, he is still in the back. I just saw him on the left-hand side.
Oh.
He's still in B of Blizzard World.
So
he's really deep
he
behind.
triggered
I'm not sure they know he is.
he triggered the Venom Mine though, so Shift4 knows he's there. Either triggered or destroyed. Looks like destroyed since he doesn't have wall hacks. But either way, just like in the fact where it doesn't matter if the trap is triggered or destroyed, it still gives intel to the team that has the Widow or the Junkrat. Just destroying it is good enough. So if you can, tip for you in comp is if you see that trap or the Widow Mine, instead of destroying it, which will give away your position to the enemy, just let your team know it's there and play around it so that they may think that flank is still safe.
This is actually forcing Show4 into a more passive position, though, just by knowing that Munchkin is a threat right now. And it also makes Hydration have to either watch out for Munchkin or poke the tank. So you can see how the threat of having that Tracer on the flank, even just the threat of it, but then Munchkin actually does execute, kind of ruins this setup and is the counterplay to this defense. Because Show4 has to take a more passive position, otherwise he risks just getting one clip.
Absolutely.
And if they want to avoid Munchkin coming in and flanking them, Hydration has to watch that angle to the left instead of putting poke on the tanks to the front. So either he continues poking the tanks to the front and Munchkin can come in and either try and kill Show4 or Munchkin. Show4 or Hydration.
Yes.
Or Hydration turns to try and peel Munchkin away and the tanks can engage of Miro and Zumba. Now, I think what happened in that instance was that Hydration continued focusing forwards. Munchkin came in and one-clipped him, and then that allowed Miro and Zumba to punish and get the point.
Now, again, your main research into these games is to see Miro's play and his factor. He seemed to play that as well?
Yeah, he played that really well.
Yeah, so I didn't see anything wrong with Miro's play. He went on the flank. He was playing this time separate from Zunba. Now, Route 66, we saw Zephyr, right? Zephyr was the diva. Do you think this is kind of Zunba complementing Miro's playstyle more, or do you think there was 2 days between the Route 66 game and this game? Do you think there were some changes made, or why did we see that positioning from Miro and his off tank be so much superior to the Route 66 fights?
I think it's the map. I think this point on offense plays a little like Volskaya, where you can poke around that shed at the front with both of your tanks, and you're waiting for somebody else on your team to make the play for you to capitalize. So you're engaging in the tank ping pong, I suppose. You're just kind of poking and maintaining position, and you're waiting for something else to happen, and then you're going to engage. On Volskaya, it could be a Widowmaker getting a pick, or your Tracer getting into position, and then you're going to engage. It's not so much a map where you're going to have any flank happen from your Winston, because it's so linear, I suppose.
Absolutely,
it's
but
pretty up and
second point, of course, one of the least linear maps, other than like Junkertown. So are we going to see? Do you think?
So now we see.
So now we want to really keep a close eye on Miro to see kind of how he performs.
Yep.
Okay.
And to be honest, though, I'm not sure what the best way is of playing this stage, because it's so confusing to me every time I watch it. So I'm not sure we can, or at least I can.
And you all can always tell that like when teams get really kind of confused about how to run maps, they just basically spam dive on it, because dive ignores geometry more or less.
It's true. I think my theory for this, though, is that peel orange compositions should be favored on Blizzard World B, because there's so many choke points. So you can go from room to room inside. You can go from standing in the road, to retreating through a choke point.
And sorry, what did you say that favors?
Peel oriented composition.
Oh, peel. Yes.
So either a Junkrat or a McCree, or I suppose you could play Junkrat and McCree if you want, but most teams will play a Tracer alongside one of Junkrat or McCree.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you get pressured too much, you just back off into a room, and then the dive team has to try and come through an additional choke to get to you. And you can keep repeating that because there's so many interconnected rooms. So that's my theory anyway, having watched only a minimum amount of Blizzard World so far.
Well, nothing I know contradicts it, so.
Yeah. Primal Rage, and now they're bringing Hydration back to life. Hydration has gotten rezzed as many times as he's died.
He doesn't. Yeah, exactly. He just keeps coming back, and he's a high priority target for Big Goose.
Okay.
He keeps dying in spots that
So
can't
that
be
fight was
avoided.
kind of started off poor for the Seoul Dynasty because Zumba had to trade his mech for the Pulse Bomb, right? So that's kind of understandable that Seoul lost that one. And here, Gladiators have 4 ultimates, including both of their defensive support ults. And then Seoul Dynasty has 3 coming up on 4. So bit of a mirror match here. Fortunately, we're in a bad angle to actually see what's going on. Is the Pulse Bomb going to happen? Ooh, no.
Missed opportunity here for sure for it. Gotta be careful. Doesn't want to overstay his welcome.
Ooh,
and
did
there's
force the trans.
forced out.
Yeah, and also there he dragged the heal away from Miro. Forces the supports to peel for each other, so he drags the heal and the defense matrix away from Miro, and they get the punish on the main tank.
Is that why he
So-
had such a slow approach? Was to get the right timing, or did you think he was just...
I think he was just trying to remain unseen, but I think it's not so much the timing that is favored, but like what the rest of his team does there. So the rest of his team don't capitalize and play really aggressive on the dive because Hydration is playing the Junkrat.
Yep.
And instead they capitalize on the fact that so many resources have been taken away from Miro at the front and focus on killing him.
T-Matrix is there to remove his pulse bomb. No joy.
So Shofor doesn't even have to get that kill.
No, he doesn't.
But they actually, I guess, lose the fight in the end. I wasn't really paying attention to how
Wow.
that one went out, but Wiki just styled on him with that blade.
Icing on the cake. And they will be able to pick up this second.
So there wasn't a lot of spectating on Miro during that point, unfortunately, and that was kind of what we primarily wanted to look at. But instant, probably just trying to reset there. The Gladiators, I assume, they weren't actually trying to win the fight, just reset. You know, make sure that they're not getting staggered or anything. Now moving into the third point, this is another one where it's a lot more linear. Do you think this one will just naturally encourage Zumba and Miro to play together, much like we saw in that first point?
I think there are potential for flanks actually on this, but again, I'm not sure the best way to play it. We've seen teams get a lot of value out of making big wide flanks over to the right hand side.
And you can also jump over that giant wall, right? That's not
Yeah.
Skybox wall, so if
Yeah.
you are a Winston, you can clear that wall with a leap. Same with quite a few heroes. So there's
that
like the
does seem
far right flank,
more-
there's jumping over, and the left flank doesn't complete itself. It kind of like rejoins up with main, but there are flank routes, yes. But it seems to be primarily, at least the way I've seen it played so far, primarily
And that seems to be
sticking
more
to
of a
main.
tracer thing. Yeah, I think the flank routes favor a tracer to make those big wide flanks because they can get the timing down better and force the rest of the team into you rather than a Winston. I haven't seen too many Winstons go on big wide flanks for Blizzard World C. I think it's very punishable if they actually realize that you're off on an angle. You're more than one leap away from the rest of your team.
That's a big stick. Yep.
Yep.
So the Pulse Bomb does get Wiki, but then Zumba uses Bomb to remech, or tries to remech, but gets just completely gets destroyed. So Zumba wasting his mech basically for 2 reasons there. First being the push was dead because Wiki died, and second of all because he wasn't able to get back into the mech anyway. So yeah, it's a bit of a waste from Zumba there. There's a
Rip Tire used as well. It's going to delay a lot of time. They need to focus on killing this. They can't really afford to... They can't afford to die and have the reset. It's better to play passive here and get the tire kill.
Yeah, so even though that tire didn't get any kills, which of course would have been optimal, the fact that they burnt so much time and now Seoul is kind of like behind on the time they
This
need
is
to
the
touch.
amazing C9. I remember this one. This was the incredible C9. But look at Miro's poor little face. But
He's so defeated.
yeah, the setup there is Seoul Dynasty are a pretty slow team at being able to get into position. I wonder whose fault that was that they didn't touch. I think Miro was relying on
Zumba. I think Zumba was going to touch.
yeah, sorry, Zumba. But just in general, they are very slow and deliberate to get into position, the Seoul Dynasty. It really hurts them in situations
Yeah,
like
their
that.
pace of play definitely seems to be slower than other teams, especially compared to a team like Philly, or at least Philly with
Yes,
DQO on the roster.
But can we wind back to the setup, say when there's 20 seconds on the clock? Just when that Riptide is buzzing around? Yeah. Because when they're trying to kill the Riptire, Wakid dies, I believe. And then... But then, from there, it's all about just being able to get somebody on a flank. So I think the person to look for is, what is Munchkin doing? Is he being able to harass? Are they just playing as a
He
big
was
ball
trying.
of
He was
six?
fucking around with hydration in this tire here, right? I don't know where he goes after this tire is dealt with, but it's likely that he got into a duel with Hydration or killed him. Right? So you'll see it go back, and then Munchkin tries to bait the tire by blinking in, then blinking out immediately.
Yeah.
And then, Surefour goes Duelist. So he's distracting Munchkin because Surefour he didn't take the duel, he forced the duel on Munchkin.
And now Munchkin is just on the right-hand side, just kind of playing with the rest of his
Oh
team.
yeah, so he
He's
did manage to disengage, but Hydration lands a damage boosted one tap. Ooh,
So I guess Munchkin was the guy that was supposed to trigger the overtime there as well. But Hydration kills him.
What it's all about right there. The reaction.
But just in
Miro's
general
face
for
says it
Seoul, they
all.
seem to be, because they play slowly and because Miro plays with the team and because I think their Tracers play with the team quite a lot as well, or certainly Munchkin does. Bunny used to do it a little less. They are very readable in what avenues they take, and I think that really hurts them when they play against Junkrat teams, because if a Junkrat knows exactly where you're going to come from, it's so much easier to shut you down. So that's
Absolutely.
one reason I think they struggle so much against the Junkrat, is they're very readable in what they're trying to go for. They set things up slowly, and that in some sense comes down to Miro being such a defensive Winston as well, or a non-aggressive Winston. I wonder what they can do to improve. Really, in my opinion, it might be too unrealistic to say just make your tanks play more aggressive, because there's so much that goes into
especially once we're moving into a meta that's more heavily favoring anti-dive over dive itself. Playing aggressive, it comes with its own set of risks.
Yeah, but you've got to be able to play that kind of aggressive dive style on offense. I think even if you're really good at defensive anti-dive's pretty difficult if you get reset.
Yeah, anti-dive is definitely way
in.
more difficult on attack. Like we saw on the Route 66 map, where they're playing kind of like an anti-dive composition on attack here, but they allowed the defenders to basically control the flanks uncontested. So
yeah,
I agree.
So I think they should really restyle their team around Fleta, around their DPS in general. But that requires them to play at a much faster pace, and at the moment, I don't think their tank line can keep up with the pace of the play being increased. When you think about it, Seoul in Apex Season 3, when they won, were not an aggressive team. People, for some reason, thought of them as a primary dive team or something. But even when they were playing, they won Apex Season 2, playing against a team that loved to run Rhine, and they were playing dive, but it was against a team that was slower than they were. It's not like they were playing lightning fast Overwatch. They were playing into Runaway, who liked playing Rhine at the time with Kaiser and kind of setting up position. And then in Apex Season 3, they had a Sombra style, which was very slow and just relied on being able, Eska coming in at weird angles, getting hacks on the enemy D.Va, and then they would take out Meko or who were they playing against at the time? Void as well. So they've never really been a fast-paced team, even though people, I think, because Miro was such a initiator of the Winston style, they think of Seoul as being a dive team, but they've always been pretty slow. I think it's hurting them now.
That's interesting insight. Now, I never followed the Korean scene. So, how important do you think it is to understanding the meta and pro Overwatch for you to pay attention to, you being the general you, to pay attention to the Korean scene, contenders, open division? Because it seems to be a lot of strategies come out of Korea.
Yeah, before the Overwatch League, it was imperative. It was the only place where proper Overwatch was being played, I think. And people would often take their cues from there. I mean, the top 5 teams in the world all throughout 2017 were Korean teams. And then right now, I don't think it's particularly important. I think there will be some Korean teams, Element Mystic, Seven, Runaway, that are ahead of the meta because they have more time to prepare for their matches compared to the blistering pace of schedule that the Overwatch League has.
Absolutely.
So they can craft strategies more.
Do you think
they're often on patches that are ahead of Owl?
I got 2 questions. I'm not sure which one to ask first. We're going to go European contenders. Even in the current meta, we're seeing European contenders do a lot of triple and even quad tank. to the point where we saw a defensive composition on Numbani run
Yeah,
Ryan,
what was
Zarya,
that?
Genji, Sombra,
Man
Lucio,
alive, I
Moira.
watched that game.
So, comments about why the European meta in contenders is so absolutely fucked compressed compared to the rest of the world? Do they just have like a gentleman's agreement not to run dive? Does Europe not know how to run dive? Why is the European meta so fucked and seemingly poor compared to the rest of the world's Overwatch?
I think Europe in general is defined by what the best teams play. And the best teams in Europe are normally meta abusers, rather than playing the best possible Overwatch, which I think Korea tries to go towards. They think of an ideal and then work towards it. Europe has always been a region where if something works, it will be spammed until somebody finds the counter, and then the counter will be spammed until someone finds a counter to that.
That also
It's
seems
always
to be
been-
what Overwatch League is to some extent.
Yeah, maybe.
Like, do you think the
Um,
blistering pace of it is limiting the amount of compositions or possibilities we see? Is the reason we see so much Tracer Widow dive one week and then so much, we're seeing these kind of same compositions replicated over and over again? Is this because everyone is coming to the same conclusion, or because one team found something that worked and everyone else tries to kind of replicate them? Is there too much Overwatch and that's causing these metas to be very uniform across all the teams?
Yeah, probably. It's difficult to have an insight without knowing what goes on in scrims, because so much of it is defined by scrims rather than actual tournament matches. I mean, if you think about it, the scrims are happening, 20 times more regularly than the tournament matches are, and teams are constantly evolving within scrims and trying
Absolutely,
things out.
which is also the reason kind of on that Kings Row A. Do you remember the Kings Row A split defense that came out during stage 2 that nobody had ever seen before, and it was like this high ground? It was, what was it? It was Widow, Orisa, Diva, Mercy, Zenyatta, and I forget the second DPS, probably Tracer or something else. But it was this.
Oh
kinda
yeah, when they were played with the Junkrat and they
Yeah,
played with the Orisa on the high
where
ground.
they it was a composition that was never seen anywhere else, so we didn't have a name for it. It was positioned funkily, and like every team ran it out of nowhere. So it's obvious that one team developed it in scrims, and then during scrims they ran it to trial it, and I guess that strategy leaked to other
Yeah.
teams early enough that other teams prepared it, and it came out of nowhere that a vast number of the teams were running this defensive style. In a composition that had not previously been seen in other tournaments or on the ladder or anything like that. And then we saw the Houston Outlaws, I think it was, get absolutely fucking crushed by this because they tried to ran like last week's meta for Kings Row without kind of practicing. And in the post-game talk, or I don't remember where the statement was actually made, but the Houston Outlaws basically said that they had felt confident on Kings Row, so they hadn't practiced it. And they got crushed by the new meta. So
I think though you have to consider the opposite situation and just ask yourself which is better, because when the matches themselves are very spread out, teams don't gather data on each other, and so what we saw in Apex when the tournament matches were spread out is that a team would practice something. I'll use the example of Rogue playing triple DPS.
Yep.
When they came to Korea, they played triple DPS and they were crushing people in scrims. But by the time the match came around, the other teams had figured out a way of countering that. But because not enough tournament matches had happened where Rogue realized they were countered, they couldn't develop a counter strat themselves. So the pace of innovation was slowed, but you saw very deliberate counters. So you saw the entire process play out. You saw each step, but it was dragged out over a longer period of time. So like if you came up with an innovative strat like Lunatic High did for the Apex Season 3 playoffs with the Sombra, nobody had time. Paradoxically, because there's a longer amount of time between matches, nobody had the repeated matches and exposure to it to be able to craft counter strategies. So even though at the moment we're seeing teams run strategies that they are not as polished on, the cycles of innovation happen much faster. So it's difficult for teams to catch up and become super polished at them, but we see fairly regular rotation of strategy.
do you think as the league develops, more teams, join into the league, and the hero pool expands and becomes more balanced. Do you think we're ever going to reach a point where there's multiple, potential compositions at the same time, and like vastly different, not just variations on Winston Diva, but are we going to find where like a team is going to have a signature, and some other teams, even though it works for them, won't work for another team? Or are we going to find like a situation in Overwatch where multiple extremely varied team comps are more or less balanced within one another, or is it always just going to be the nature that most teams play one comp or strategy, the same comp or strategy between them? Tough
I think
question, I know.
in some sense we have that already, but not with the tank line. You have it with the DPS changing the style of the team. You have like the core structure of your mobile tanks that can play a lot of different ways. I think Uber talked about it yesterday, actually, that Tracer can be played in such a huge variety of play styles because there's so many decision forks of what you should do, and all of them are valid, but you can pick any one of them. As long as the rest of the team plays around them. And it's the same with the more mobile tanks of Winston and Diva, but it's less so with the Rhine. You're kind of limited to a couple of correct decision forks rather than a whole bunch based on how your team plays around them. He's just more of a one track hero. And so I wonder whether we're ever really going to see variation on every role. I don't think that'll ever be the case, but I do think that we'll see teams have different styles. I mean, all the teams already have different styles. They're just
but they're different
minimal
styles within the same heroes and the same compositions.
In some cases, I mean, the compositions that Philadelphia runs are massively different to the compositions that are not massively different, but they are different to the ones that the Houston Outlaws run, for example, or you have like very hard dive teams that run a lot of Genji Tracer and run a bit of Widow Tracer, and then other teams that run a lot of Widow Junkrat or Junkrat Tracer.
But it is telling about the meta that you're only listing 2 heroes out of 6, and we automatically know what the other 4 are.
That's true.
So
you do get some variation with the supports as well, but it doesn't really change the style of the team that much. If you run Lucio or you run Mercy, it has a small change in what your game plan is and the style of the team, but not as much as the rest of the heroes. I don't think we'll ever be at a place where you can run whatever you want. But it is interesting that, for example, Element Mystic have a lot of really cool Orisa strategies that are based around that defense.
Now, Element Mystic, if there's probably quite a few people in chat who don't know who Element Mystic is. They're Korean contenders, just confirm?
Yeah,
so they're Korean contenders, and there's been multiple people, Achilles and Wolf, the English commentators for Korean contenders, have said that they think that Element Mystic would be a top 5 team in the Overwatch League.
Yep.
So, Sideshow, are they that good? Do they have a potential to just Royal Road?
Oh yeah.
So just give the people in the chat who have never heard Element Mystic before who they are, why they're somebody to watch, and what their future is holding.
Element Mystic are a team that when Apex was still going on, in the last season of Apex Season 4, they played in Challenger, which was the level below that. So imagine Contenders, but for Apex. They played in Contenders, and they were easily the best team in Contenders. And a lot of people noticed them when they played against the South Korean World Cup team, and they destroyed them 4-0. And then that World Cup team went on to win the World Cup. So they're a very good team. They have one star player on DPS called Sparkle, who is 15, I believe, maybe 16, who can play a huge range of heroes and plays them all very well, particularly the Genji. Then they have a couple of DPS players that they've rotated. They're now playing with Guard, who's the best Sombra at the moment in Korea. Their tank line used to contain Fearless, who went over to the Shanghai Dragons. I mean, it's why I personally was so hyped about Fearless joining Shanghai, is because I've seen him play on a really good team, and I know he's a really good main tank. But Shanghai's just been like a prison for him, and also he hasn't been playing well within the Shanghai system. So perhaps it was just the perfect storm when he was playing with Element Mystic. But their diva is also absolutely excellent. A guy called Dako. I was really surprised actually that he wasn't picked up for the Overwatch League when that first came around.
Now, with the expansion teams coming out for Season 2, or at least the rumored expansion teams, do you think it's more likely that a team like Element Mystic, gets picked up by an org or something like that, or are they just going to have their players poached to other teams? What's more likely?
Some of their players are too young, and I'm not 100% sure on all of their ages. I know that Sparkle's too young. Dako might be. I keep getting conflicting reports about his age, but I believe the Korean commentators said that he's 18 or 19, despite some people in the community claiming that he's 16. So we'll see. But I think it's more likely that if there's an expansion team, for me, it seems likely that there would be another one in Korea, because the Korean talent pool is so big, and there's already about half of the players in the league are from Korea.
40%, 45%, somewhere in there?
Something like that, yeah. The fan base is really good. It's going to be a breeding ground for new talent, obviously. So for me, it would make sense if there's another buyer in Korea or somewhere else in Asia, that there would be a Korean team picked up, and Element Mystic would be my choice. We actually had a competition with some analysts in the scene before the Overwatch, or just as the Overwatch League started, called Owl Pellets. The idea was to take all the leftover pieces of the players that weren't picked up for Owl and try and form them into a team that you thought would place highly. And mine was centered around Element Mystic. In November, or in December actually, I tweeted that in August I wouldn't be surprised if they were the best team in the world, because they looked so good when they were playing in Challenger of Apex. Like before the Overwatch League started, I thought they had the potential to become the best team in the world in August when the Overwatch League ended. So I think they would be a great core for a team that's looking to expand. But we haven't really, with the Owl teams, we didn't really see people just wholesale pick up rosters. The GMs always made tweaks to them, and I think in some sense this is the arrogance of some of the GMs, was like, I can take this elite tier team and make it better. But for some teams it definitely did work. FNR GFE turning into the Houston Outlaws, they did a good job adding like Raucus into the lineup, for example. And Jake didn't play for FNR GFE, did he? No, he was playing for a different team. No. So I think those were two great additions to the Houston Outlaws, and definitely made that team better than it would have been otherwise. But also FNR GFE weren't world beaters anyway. It was kind of a weird pickup that ended up working out really well for Flame and for Houston. NYXL added Jonak, obviously incredible pickup. And Arc as well, incredible pickup. So I think there are improvements that you could make from Element Mystic, but they would make a great core of a team. It's also, the question is, do Blizzard put something in place that gives the expansion teams first pick on some people? Because otherwise they might be left kind of up in the air without being able to.
That's another question. Like, are these new teams, they're going to be playing catch up not only on the teams themselves, but the practice resources, they're well established. They're practicing against all this. So the expansion teams, I'm going to be very interested to see how well they perform. But any other teams? This is just one last question from chat. Any other teams that you can see being picked up or having the potential to be picked up for Overwatch League other than Element Mystic?
There are another two teams in Korean contenders that are pretty good. They're in different groups from to Element Mystic, so it's difficult to directly assess who's better. But it seems like the teamwork for Element Mystic is better than these two teams. I'll just add that as a caveat. But Seven are another contenders team in Korea that actually played at the same time as Element Mystic in Challengers and came second to them in Challengers. So the season that we were looking at Apex Challengers and saying, wow, these Element Mystic guys look bloody legit. Seven were the second place team that also looked pretty good. and have a couple of decent players. There's a guy called Bazzi that plays for them who was an incredibly aggressive but insanely good Zenyatta player who actually made the swap over to DPS for them, kind of like Kariv.
Yeah.
Also, Evo, their main tank, is a very good main tank. Their tanks in general, Evo and Free, are pretty good. They definitely could form the core of an Overwatch League team. And the other one is Runaway, who have certainly declined from their heyday. They've lost a couple of their core players. TZ being one of them on the main tank position has gone to London. They lost. Who else did they lose? The support player as well. I think they had to rotate somebody from that support position, and they brought in Twilight. I can't remember, his name's escaping me at the moment. But Runaway could definitely form the core. I think Runaway at the moment looks like probably the third best team in Korea, but they've got a good structure. So if you added better tank players, Cox, of course, that was it. Yeah, they lost Cox, who was one of their callers as well. So I think if you add some good support and tank players back into Runaway, I think they've got a good system for a Overwatch League team, and they'd be incredibly popular as well.
Awesome. Let's watch some more Overwatch.
Let's do it. So I like the Sombra here from LA Gladiators because this point, as we were saying, is more of one where you are slowly taking ground and engaging in.
Yeah, and we can set up that
battle.
crossfire with Hydration and Surefour either on the same flank or separate flanks to kind of threaten from 3 different angles. That hack from Gambler is huge. Going to get peeled for, which is really nicely done by Seoul Dynasty, but Gambler still does go down. Surefour trades his life for it, though.
Fisher playing aggressively onto that one as well.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that they might go for the hacks on the front line instead.
I would have expected that as well. But
they're playing at high tempo.
Yeah, and it's like the Mercy there was definitely a riskier hack, because he's playing inside, right? Through a doorway with a ceiling. Very difficult to dive in there. So not overly surprising that they took losses to do that, but surprising that they did go for a target in such a good position.
Oh no, Fisher sits on that one like he's trying to lay an egg. But in general, LA Gladiators are a pretty aggressive team, so
very much so.
It's in some sense unsurprising that they would play aggressive even with a Sombra, which is normally a slightly slower, more calculated hero.
How did that
Bishop down to 5 HP.
Oh man, that was
because of the armor.
Brutal.
If anybody else just tickles him, looks at him, sneezes on him, then he's dead.
That was so unlucky. There was not 5 points of damage on that D.Va mech, so he survived a max damage Riptire. That is an unluckers.
Yeah.
And Bill Goose was in Valkyrie there, so.
I think, actually, can we rewind? Because even in that fight, when they're trying to re-engage, Seoul Dynasty have a good chance of being able to get back in here, especially with this pick on Fisher. So I'm kind of wondering what
Fisher
went wrong.
Fisher gets rezzed, though.
Yeah, Fisher gets rezzed.
Big Goose goes into Valkyrie.
Do they have a Transcendence? Yeah, they use the Transcendence as well.
Both support ultimates plus the res on main tank gives them a crazy amount of value.
What's Wakid up to?
Where is Wakid?
That's what I'm worried. That's what I'm wondering about.
Because he used his Riptire kind of like behind the straw hut and then retreated to Arches.
Because when you see Jake play, he's very the team centers themselves around Jake, and he is outputting crazy amounts of damage and doesn't get punished for using his concussion mines in an aggressive manner because the rest of his team is peeling for him. And here I see Wicked playing more of a passive Junkrat, where he's trying to sit behind his team and do damage from there. But your damage output is severely lowered, and it means that you're much less likely to win the fight, I think.
And we even saw it in the Boston versus New York game, where the Junkrats weren't really playing with their team. They were playing more flanks, where 2 of the Junkrats actually encountered each other on the stables flank in Junkertown. So we are seeing Junkrat used in a lot of different ways.
Yeah. I think the optimal way to play him if you're trying to retake like this is, I mean, obviously go for the Riptire and keep yourself safe. This is all perfectly fine, and unlucky not to get that D.Va D-Mac. But when he comes back into the fight here on the left-hand side, I would expect him to be playing with his tanks inside this bubble, playing a real core central role for his team and trying to build up to the Valkyrie, build up to the Primal Rage. Backing out there and trying to take the Arch position is just inviting aggression onto you that you won't be able to peel away. I think I'd rather they just went like full aggro with that and tried to play around Wickid's damage. I could certainly envision Houston doing that kind of move and it working out for them.
Where's
Because it's not like you can call a disengage there. You can't disengage with this composition. You're going to wipe if you leave, so you might as well go for it.
Wickid gets Surefour with the discorded one-shot. Big Goose reses him up. EMP coming in on the tanks or on the Zenyatta?
Looks like it.
Ooh, Lordy. Oh, he gets it, though. And he survives? Holy smokes. Who protected him there?
I think Bishu had a defense matrix, yep.
That was good.
Bishu jumped off and peeled.
Not a lot of value out of the EMP, though. However, Riptire's in to save the day for Seoul.
Yeah, they get the kill on Shaz there. But the cart continues to move.
Mm-hmm.
And they also, Seoul Dynasty haven't retreated to the archway yet. They're still kind of stuck around this angle.
To the Dark King, like the entrance to the Dark King, you mean?
Yeah, the Dark King, yeah. They have now, but previously they were kind of split on the other side. There was potential for Gambler or Jaehong to get punished. But now they're in a pretty defensible location.
Thanks, Emos. Welcome to the stream. It's an interesting use of Primal.
Transcendences.
That was Miro's Primal, wasn't it? Now, what is Miro trying to accomplish with this Primal? Since, again, Miro is the focus. Let's watch this again. And where is Miro in this clip? Is he not back yet? I think I went a little bit too far back. Where is Miro? There's Miro. He's back with his Zenyatta. He's back with Jaehong. Now, what does Miro try and accomplish with this Primal? Went after Zunba. So Zunba's still there. And then Miro jumps in Primals. Was he trying to do the jump tech on Shaz? Is that what he was doing? Oh, yeah. So
yeah, it looks like it.
Yeah. Okay. Wait, no. Shaz
No, it's not.
No.
I don't even, yeah. I don't know what he's accomplishing here.
Chat? He was half. He wasn't low enough to dictate that, especially with Jaehong still having trance, right? Because Jaehong just trances here.
Yeah, the only thing I'm thinking is, like, if he really tries to knock Shaz away and so that they have the ability to get picks with their transcendence, like a pretty elaborate play like that.
But he's bumping him into his team.
Yeah.
So look at this. Miro's at 300, 250, Primal, Trance. Miscommunication?
Probably, yeah. I don't think they need to invest both of those ults there. One or the other.
Trance was out first. Fine. No, Shaz's Trance was out first before Miro primaled. Miscommunication or mistake, one of the two. Pete, do you know how many times I asked chat what they think happened and Fat Finger is offered as a suggestion?
The fattest fingers.
Every single time, I'm like, did they make a mistake? They're probably a fat finger. It's like, I don't think that actually happens as much as chat thinks that happens. Unless you're Custa. But, you know.
Playing with fists instead of fingers.
Can you imagine trying to play Overwatch with like a Guitar Hero drum controller? That'd be hilarious.
People have done it.
Really? Oh my goodness. I heard about the people who played Symmetra with a microwave.
Yeah, people have played Hanzo with bananas and stuff like that.
Now, these fights are so chaotic, and like they really aren't short fights between these two teams, are they? There's no like clear engagement, you know, there's no well-executed short fight. All of these fights that we're seeing are I feel like they're longer than average than we see most dive fights going on. Is that something you would agree with?
Yes, well, neither team are really playing dive. So
they're
LA,
not
LA
really.
Gladiators are trying to play this slow comp around a Sombra,
Mm-hmm.
and they played that fight. I mean, we were talking about them playing a little aggressive with it earlier and getting picks on the backline or hacks on the backline, but that isn't how Hydration was playing that fight. He was very slowly moving forwards, generating EMP, and then played with around the EMP. The counterplay to a team playing slow like this is to play really fast, aggressive dive, and
Absolutely.
instead they're playing around Wikid and playing slow themselves.
Did they
But they're
C9
not getting
again?
the yeah, but they'd already lost 3
Okay.
players, so I guess it's
They
it's
would
much
have
more
would have
reasonable than
lost
the previous time.
regardless, right?
Yeah, but yeah, so again, Seoul playing this Junkrat composition into a team that isn't going to dive them, and the Junkrat doesn't really do much for them when they get EMP'd. The Junkrat isn't putting out enough poke on them in that situation to make them win the slow fight. So I think they should have just gone for full dive in that situation. Try and put Wikid over on Genji, play aggressive into them, try and get the team wipes before the EMP comes out. That would be the way that I would suggest playing around it. But instead, they're going for this very low tempo, slow pace of play, and LA Gladiators kind of grind out a win there. I think Blizzard B it lends itself to slow compositions though as well.
Now, your objective going into this was to try and learn a little bit more about Seoul, specifically Miro's playstyle. Do you feel like what we saw was enough to kind of confirm your initial thoughts on how Miro's been playing?
No, I think I'll end up watching a ton more about Miro as well, particularly on maps that are more dive focused, stuff like I guess Numbani, or might go back into stage 2 and have a look at some Gibraltar stuff as well and see what happens when Seoul are forced to play aggressively and execute their dive like that. But it seems everything so far seems to lend credence to the initial suspicions I had that Miro seems to be behind the meta in some sense with his Winston.
Mm-hmm. So far, that theory hasn't been disproven, but I don't think it's been conclusively proven yet either. I'm going to thank some subscribers and donators, and while I'm doing that, I'll just ask chat to kind of post your questions for Sideshow in the chat, if you don't mind answering some chat questions.
Yeah, sure.
Absolutely. Okay, so looks like we got... I got to figure out where I left off at. So, the Swag Pony Express subscribed tier 1. Thank you so much, my friend. Doormat and El Pared subscribed with Prime. Timo dropped the tier 1 sub for the second month in a row. Says Sideshow Omega lol.
I used to play with Timo.
Oh, really? In TF2 days?
No, I think by the time I was at that level, he'd already left actually. But I've certainly played pugs and stuff with Taimu.
That's awesome.
I played a lot of 1v1 against Taimu as well. I used to wreck him.
Vasher04 resubscribed tier 1 for 5 months. Still, I haven't even been streaming for 6 months yet, but we got so many 5-month subscribers. Been here since the beginning. Really appreciate it, Vasher. Missy OW with the Prime sub, as well as Dr. Ashmond. And then Yiska. Hey, Yiska subscribed. You know Yiska, I assume?
I do.
Yeah, he was on last week. We were taking a look at a couple maps and whatnot.
He called Hureg a bot.
He did. That was so funny. I couldn't believe he said that. Even if you have that opinion, you may not want to air it publicly.
Oh, no. You need the spice, man.
You need the spice. Man, you can say that. You're already working for Blizzard.
That's true.
Iterald has resubscribed tier 2 for 2 months in a row. Thanks, Iterald. Really appreciate the tier 2 going above and beyond, keeping the lights on. Prime subs don't work, so I upgraded since this is my favorite stream on Twitch. Stream makes OWL way more fun. Thanks. Well, I'm glad I could help you out. And Sideshow. Certainly. Can I just say how impressed I am with your knowledge of everything? Just
thank you.
I can respect the amount of hours and time and dedication it takes to understanding not just the Overwatch League that you're in charge of, but you have such an intimate knowledge of the Korean scene despite that not being your direct job description. Very impressive. So thank you very much for agreeing to come on the stream.
No problem.
I definitely think chat has enjoyed your presence. Wordman with the 100 bits. Roses are red, violets are blue. NA is greater than EU. And Wongtong Fui. Sorry, go ahead.
Koreans. NA just imports Korean players. That's why they're better than Europe.
Yeah.
Europe stick with the Europeans.
And Wongtong Fui resubscribed tier 1 for 2 months in a row. Look at you, big dog. Hey, Wongtong. How you doing, bud? Fun. So this Wongtong, I just got to tell you, is he was a CSGO pro, and he's come to Overwatch to play. He's just transitioned from CSGO to Overwatch, but he learned when he was like really young. When he was first learning to play Counter-Strike, wore his headphones backwards, and he hasn't been able to relearn it or unlearn it. So to this day, like a top 500 Widowmaker, and he plays with his headphones backwards, and his brain is just wired to know that if he hears it out of his left ear, it comes out. I shit you not.
But how does he function in everyday life? Does he turn the wrong way when someone knocks on a door?
Supposedly, it's only where he's wearing headphones. And, I was like, do you just, get hit by cars when you go across the street? But I kid you not, he legitimately plays on purpose with his headphones backwards. Wongtong Fui. Look it up if you don't believe me. Dude plays Widowmaker. And, he's scoped in, and, a Tracer will attack him from the right. And it blows my mind. Anyway. Uber Hoober, that's a name I haven't seen before. 100 bits. I have an overall question. I was a top 500 support main on console and just moved to PC. I solo queued to top 500. Is it the same thing on PC, or are there any other tips? The aim is going to be better, but it's the same game, same strats. Just and there's going to be fewer aim-dependent heroes on console than there is on PC. But other than that, it's the same game. So, what's his name? Wongton Fui, Wongtonfui. If you don't believe me that he wears his headphones backwards, check it out. Okay,
that's truly ridiculous.
Yeah, it's pretty fucked. Yeah. Okay, so let's see what questions people had for you. Okay. What do you think about my beard? That's the first question. Don't answer that. Who are the top 3 tracers in your opinion?
Top 3 tracers. It's very difficult actually to answer this tracer question because I think you have to go kind of based on. There's 2 different ways of approaching it. Do you do it based on form in terms of who is playing best within the past, say, month? Or do you do it based on
the great part about these questions is you can invent your own criteria.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Or do you, but this is the internal debate that I always have when people ask me this, or is it based on kind of their historic ability and what you could expect from them in any match in the future? So I would say the top tracers at the moment are Striker, Sabiol B, and Prophet, perhaps. Although both Snillo and Carpe have been performing incredibly well, but Carpe actually recently has not been playing Tracer as much. He's been focused more on the rest of his hit scan, and overall has looked like a candidate for league MVP. But it's difficult to really decide who should be on top there. Sabiol B can play every style to an incredible degree, but often plays around and with his team. Striker is the setup guy for Boston and plays with almost no resources and is still incredible and bullies people out of 1v1s because he's got such phenomenal mechanical skill in them. And so he's such a valuable player for Boston, and he plays with no resources, and he's so good that I think you could make a very good argument that he's the best tracer in the league right now. Prophet is incredible, has impeccable timing, and consistently clutches out in by playing that really aggressive dive style that I love to watch. Snillo plays kind of similarly to Prophet and has actually been remarkably consistent and very good. And Carpe plays kind of more individual, off on his own, and follows up damage a lot of the time rather than creating opportunities. For me, I think overall, if we're talking about like MVP Tracer and packaging the entire discussion together, I would put Striker there, Sabiol B, and and probably Snillo right now. As wild as that sounds, as
Okay.
crazy as that sounds, I think I would put Snillo up there. Effect is also, if Dallas
Yeah.
keep performing really well, Effect will be good. The issue with Effect is he plays disconnected from the rest of his team a lot of the time. He still needs to work on focusing on syncing up with the rest of his team. I mean, you could make the argument his team need to work on syncing up with him, but it's normally the Tracer's job to call and initiate those kind of things. So
I'm
I think,
gonna. So there's
that's
quite a
the
few
thing.
questions backing up here. So I'm gonna hold you to like 30 seconds. We'll do rapid fire questions. You
Sure.
okay with that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So let's do some rapid fire questions here. With the last few weeks, do you think that the gap between Western and Korean teams has closed?
Mm, yeah, in general, it has, and it has for quite a while. But if you think of it less as general and more of NYXL and the rest of the league, or NYXL and the Western teams, I think they're still ahead in overall consistency. A couple of close matches and a loss to Boston do not equal them dropping out of first place team.
Absolutely.
Overall, their consistency and the ability to beat anybody on any given day still puts NYXL ahead. But yes, in general, there is no gap right now between the Korean teams as a conglomerate of three and the Western top teams.
Question for you both. Could we see triple support, triple tank comms with Brigido's release? I doubt we'll see triple tank because you will need some sort of long-range dealer like a McCree or something. But what do you think? Triple tank, triple support? I think triple support's viable. What do you think?
Teams have actually been trying it out in scrims.
Absolutely. I've heard the same rumors.
Yeah, but I've no idea. I'm actually fairly terrible at theory crafting with new heroes that come out because all of the way that I think about Overwatch is like using knowledge in the past. So I've never seen Brigitte. So how do I know how she plays?
Who do you main in competitive?
I normally fill, which means playing Zen or Mercy or Winston or Diva.
Who's your favorite main tank?
Winston, I guess. Are there only two main tanks? I suppose
Oh,
Orisa
main tank
could be
player.
used as a main
It
tank.
was a different question.
Oh, main tank player. I thought that we were still talking.
Yeah, that's fine. My bad.
My favorite main tank is probably. I mean, if we're talking favorite, not best, I actually like Fraggy. I love watching Muma when he was playing with the Houston Outlaws, but watching the development of Fraggy go from a fucking liability to an actually good tank player, and any time that they can use him on the Rhine, he's really well supported and plays really well, has been a joy to watch. I love the guy, and now he's performing at a really good level.
That's awesome. What was the deal with XQC moving in with you?
Oh, Bren sat us down one time and was like, XQC's looking for a place to live. Let's let him live in our living room. And I said, Bren, that is the most atrocious idea you've ever had in your entire life. And Johnny said something similar. And then he kind of walked us through how funny it would be. And the fact
for like a week.
Oh, yeah. For like a week or two. But that was the thing. It was just going to be until XQC found his new place. It was not going to be like a permanent thing. I doubt XQC is really frugal enough to live in our living room with a mattress against the wall for the rest of his life. But I don't think it's happening. I think XQC has already found a different place to live. We were definitely up for it, though. Bren talked us into it. Johnny actually made a deal, Reinforced made a deal that was only if me and Bren tidy the apartment, he was perfectly fine with it. I think he didn't negotiate well enough.
There's a question for me, not for you. Based on having average mechanics, yet have GM accounts in all roles, can you reach GM mostly from knowing your job in the game well enough and being aware? Yeah, like this isn't CS:GO where aim is everything, right? You know, there's Winston, a character that does not require very good aim. Now, I would like to differentiate the difference between aim and mechanics, like cooldown management or ult usage. Those are mechanics that are separate from clicking on people's heads. Like Primal Rage, for example, is one of the most difficult and most challenging ults to use in terms of like a mechanical perspective, whereas when to use Tactical Visor is more of like a knowledge thing. So yeah, you can definitely make it a GM. Like, and again, I say that I have shitty mechanics, but I have shitty mechanics for a GM. So I still have above average mechanics, but when I'm saying I have bad mechanics, I mean relative to other grandmasters. Opinions on Dante.
I think Dante's pretty good. He's found his niche within San Francisco as well. Gets to play the Sombra, can also play the Genji at times. His Genji looked pretty good. I mean, they were playing against Shanghai Dragons. It was a travesty of a match. It was absolutely unbelievable the amount of kills each Genji was getting. Because there was just no thought about the win condition of the other team from either roster, or any attempt to shut them down or focus them. But I think he's a pretty good player that will continue to see game time. But I don't think he ranks among the top X, the top 5 of Tracer or Genji or whatever other hero he plays other than Sombra. And I also think that San Francisco Shock as a team underestimate how disciplined you have to be when playing around Sombra, and still don't quite understand the win conditions when you play with Sombra.
Next question is coming from Ichirel. It says, is Pharah underused in Overwatch League? Me. Mentioned that Pharmacy Dive can hard counter certain comps, but we very rarely see Pharah this stage. Should we be seeing her more on certain points in maps, such as on offense, when it's known there is no defensive hit scan?
It's very. I'm not sure. I'm not sure whether it is or not. The thing is, a lot of teams are playing with Widowmaker a lot of the time, and so it's difficult. Pharah's a weird hero, right? Because to approach a Widow or a Soldier is difficult, but if you manage to create a distraction to get in position and then you're above them, you are then in a massively advantageous position. You can still play Pharah into hit scan as long as you have a sightline to play around, or you're planning to play hyper aggressive with your tanks to distract them and then get in position above them. So, but just in general, I think there's so much Widow that it's been off-putting for teams to run.
And there is no real guarantee that especially if you're attacking with Pharmacy, defending with Pharmacy. There's no reason that the opponent can't just be like, oh, they're running Pharmacy, and just turn their ass around and go swap comps. So it's easier for attackers to counterpick than it is for defenders. Next question is coming in from Serotonin Flood. Will you comment on Mayhem's prospects in Stage 3 given the addition of Saya Player and Awesome Guy? What issues does Mayhem still need to prioritize to rise in the standings?
I think Mayhem are now in a position where they can succeed. With Awesome Guy and Saya Player and Ryder coming into the team, they have now kind of figured out how to play the Tracer Winston situation. I was actually talking to Swoosh last night about this. And they still have a number of other issues. Vic does a lot of calling for the team, so even when you would want to run Logix and Saya Player, because Logix is such a carry player when you put him on the Tracer or even the Widow role and have Saya Player play like that, they don't sync up as well, it seems, with Logix playing compared to Saya Player or Vic. I think Zebasai as well still gets caught out of position a lot of the time, and even though he's a caller for the team and a leadership figure, it looks a bit like a bit of a liability in some situations. But the team is going to improve. They can steal wins off some teams, but they're suffering from the same thing as Shanghai. They improved with the mid-season signings, but not as much as some other teams improved. So they still look better, but they're playing a catch-up game still.
Chat really wants to know what you're eating.
I am eating some chocolate that I smuggled into the US because you're not allowed to carry dairy into the US from outside of it.
Banned.
And when the people asked me at the border, do you have any food products? I had 3 delicious bars of Green and Black's dark chocolate in my bag, and I said, no, sir, I have not got any chocolate, and now I'm eating it and rewarded for the fruits of.
So you're a fugitive now.
I am, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yiska's...
But it was worth every bite.
Yiska asks, what do you think allows Boston to bounce back from such a dire scenario? I assume he's referring to Dreamcasper. Has Mistakes always trained the same champion pool as Dreamcasper? Do you think that's the way to go over specializing your substitutes? And first off, Mistakes looked honestly pretty fucking horrible on Genji. So I'll just preface my own statement before passing that question off to you, Sideshow.
In terms of has he always practiced the same? Mistakes started as a tracer player, I believe. Um, he may have even played support before he joined a proper team, but he was playing in 1-2-3 in contenders, and he was playing tracer with them, and he didn't play much else. But he's always had that kind of grind mentality where he can pick up another hero fairly easily. But I think the key is not so much mistakes and his hero pool. It's more like people overrated how much Dreamcasper was doing for that team. He was good with the resources they gave him, and his Pharah was excellent, and that was kind of more of the individualistic side of it. But playing Genji in the Boston Dive is really just about doing your job. They're gonna pocket the shit out of you. They're gonna give you the Mercy Beam. They're gonna give you the Harmony Orb. They're gonna set up the dive with Striker and Gamsu. All the opponents are gonna be in position. You just then have to execute. And mistakes can fill that role. I bet there's almost all the rest of the Genjis in the league would be able to fill that role. The Boston strengths are Striker without resources, being able to shepherd people into position and win 1v1s and pressure enemy tracers away. And then the rest of their team have great timing, great understanding of being able to execute, and are very clinical in how they do it. And so I think people were looking at the Genji getting a lot of the kills, or looking at how effective the dive was and overrating the individual components rather than the system. And so I thought that they would still be able to do really well. Where I thought they would struggle is when mistakes went over to the Widow or the Pharah. Mistakes has not played any of the Pharah, and I don't believe that's in his wheelhouse, but we'll have to see. It certainly won't be as good as Dreamcasper's. And his Widow actually looked reasonable. It was better than I was expecting. In terms of whether you should have your substitutes practice the same things but with different playstyles, I think that's a really interesting way of going about it. And I think that is and has been proven to be the superior method. With teams like Philadelphia Fusion, it means that you have two mirrored teams, an A team and a B team, that can both play against each other and play the same heroes against each other and get effective practice. And it also means that if you want to run a more aggressive Genji rather than a more passive flanking Genji, you sub EQO in. If you want a tracer that syncs up better with Fraggy rather than playing on his own on flanks, then you get Snillo in to play tracer instead of Carpe. I think having different playstyles rather than different hero pools allows you to be less predictable and adapt to your opponents better. It comes down to Overwatch a lot of the time comes down to style of dive rather than different heroes.
Last question. Chat is also asking quite a bit about Defran. Good enough for the Overwatch League? You know, he's stated that he's not interested in joining at the current moment, but is he good enough? Would his past of like throwing and getting suspended get in the way of him joining the team or anything? Just general thoughts on Defran.
Defran definitely seems good enough to join the Overwatch League, and when he was playing, he was good enough to be Overwatch League caliber. But you have to want to join the Overwatch League, and teams have to want to pick you up as well. So if he had the mentality that he wanted to play professionally, I'm sure he could. Would a team want to pick him up? I think there are teams that would give him a chance, considering how good he was in the past, and if he was really determined to make it as a pro player. There's more support structure in these Overwatch League teams in terms of psychology, and you've got things provided for you, and you're living in a team house, and there's people looking after you, than Defran when he was trying to play in
with Selfless.
In Selfless. But also, a couple of orgs might not want to associate with the image of Defran based on what he did in the past. He was actually banned from contenders, but I believe he wasn't banned from the Overwatch League. But Blizzard do this thing where they check on players, right, and look into their history. It's never been revealed what they look at, so it's possible that they that those kind of infractions would stop you from joining an Overwatch League team. I don't know. So. But it's all a big hypothetical anyway because he didn't want to play.
Do you think XQC is going to be prevented from joining the Canadian World Cup team?
I have no idea. I actually don't have a clue about that. My instinct is to say no, but who knows? I have no idea.
Cool. Well, that's 3 p.m. 2 for you, but I both know that we're doing something in an hour that we need to prepare for. So
I'm not.
You're not
I'm
doing
not doing that anymore.
Oh.
No.
You're just leaving me out to dry.
Unfortunately, yes. I think they have a different person with you, but I had to cancel because I have some of the members of the talent, the guys on the desk, do an improvisation comedy improv training as part of
Oh, that's
as part of
awesome.
the stuff that we do.
That's
And so
awesome.
we actually have a
And I
show
heard that
in
Bren was doing a vocal trainer as well. So I'm very,
yeah,
very jealous of the resources that you guys have available to you to improve your craft. But
yeah, Blizzard are
um,
great.
thank you so much for joining me. Do you want to just give your shout outs? And again, for the people, we did it at the beginning, but let's do it for the people who stuck around to the end. Let
Yeah,
chat
sure.
know again who you are, and then if they want to find you elsewhere, where they can find you and follow you.
Yeah, so I'm Sideshow, work as a desk analyst for the Overwatch League, break down plays and stuff in between the live games. My Twitter is at Sideshow Gaming. I tend to tweet some stuff behind the scenes and some stuff just about the matches, some small pieces of analysis and stuff. My Twitch, which I've started using a little bit more often to do VOD reviews and stuff like that, is twitch.tv/sideshow. And then some stuff gets uploaded to YouTube as well with kind of either me talking about teams or little snippets from the VODs, which is youtube.com/sideshow1994, which is how old I am, 1,994 years old. I don't look a day past 20.
Perfect. Well, thanks for joining me. I'm going to be ending the stream pretty quick here because we just crossed 8 hours, and anything past this, I think is going to be a little bit unhealthy for me. So I'm going to go eat up, hydrate, relax a little bit. So thank you to everyone for watching. Sideshow, thanks so much for joining me. You guys have a great day. I'm live next time on Wednesday. You're going to see me Wednesday morning is the next time I'll be streaming. But thank you for joining. Thank you for watching. You guys have a fantastic Sunday. I'll see you later this week. Bye now. Oh, sorry. Yes. I forgot. One more thing. Pugs. Pickup games. So if you don't know, it's basically the competitive game mode, but in a custom game where people kind of all, you join up together, you get assembled onto teams, and you play the competitive mode, but in a custom game. So you're not putting SR at risk. You can play with other people who are willing to build team comps and aren't going to one trick or be toxic or throw, or else the mods are going to ban them faster than Blizzard ever would. So if you want to participate in some pugs, have some fun matches, we usually host pugs after Sunday streams. So join the Discord, look for the channel. It should be public, and pugs will be starting up pretty soon after stream ends. That's it. You guys have a great Sunday. I'll talk to you later. Oh, forgot to figure out who we're hosting. Wood tier streamer. Let's go find somebody. Who is streaming right now? You got any recommendations?
No idea. I'm going to turn mine on for an hour because you said 3 p.m. and I thought you meant 3 p.m. Pacific. So I've got
I'm
an hour to
Mountain.
kill.
We could host Muma. Might have to do Muma.
Yeah.
Muma would be a good one. Harry Butcher started streaming.
Harry Butcher, what an absolute classic.
He just started full-time streaming 3 days ago.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, Harry Butcher is full-time streaming now. It's crazy. I saw him live 2 days ago. I was like, what the hell? I've been following you for like months hoping you actually started streaming. And he did. Host Sideshow. I'm going to host Muma, and then whenever you go live, I'll pass the host to you, Sideshow. Are you going to go like live right away?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I'll just do an initial host to Muma just to pass things, and then pass it over to you. Thanks for watching, guys. I'm out of here. Bye. You. And come on, mouse. And we're done.